Okay, I'm live. I just sent the link to the other two fine gentlemen. We were going to have three joining us this evening, but unfortunately, John Hicks, what did he say? It was someone he was working with, I believe, that had something he had to be pulled away for some reason. Anyways, he's not going to be able to make it with us tonight, but we do have a couple gentlemen. We have Keith McIntyre, as well as, and he's going to be the leader of Libertarian Party of the in BC, by the way. Be interested to talk with this gentleman. And we also have Mitchell Foley. He was running for PPC. We've talked in the past. He's now, I believe, has something to do with the Libertarian Party Mises Caucus or something like that in Canada. Anyways, these are two Libertarian gentlemen that are going to be joining us tonight. And I do see actually Keith has already joined us, and I see Mitchell is ready to join us too. So I'm going to introduce them here right now. Sure, some of you folks already know them anyways. Hey, what's going on, Keith? How you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty great. I just want to clarify, though, that there is one other person running for leader on Saturday, so not leader yet.
Nope, the speaker's still showing on. Oh, one sec. Just one sec, Keith. I forgot to turn on the speaker. That comes in handy. There we go. Yeah, it works better when it's turned on.
Hey, there you go. Yeah, I was just saying, I wanted to clarify that there is one other person running for leader on Saturday. So
there is another one, you say?
There is, yes.
Oh, so you got some competition.
Yeah, that's good.
I haven't been. I've been so busy with so much other stuff that's going on. I didn't realize that. But who's the other gentleman that's going to be running against you?
Golok Budai is also running. So.
Okay. Wait a minute. So I'm on Gab, and I've seen, and he's quite a prolific poster over on Gab, and I did see some stuff going on over there. Seems a little controversy within. Imagine that, libertarians, a little infighting in terms of libertarians. Imagine that.
Imagine that.
Anyways, just give me one sec there, Keith. I do see Mitchell has joined us. I'm going to bring him into the stream there as well. Hey, what's going on, Mitchell?
Hello, everyone. How are you?
I got my brother-in-law trying to get a hold of me. He seems quite desperate, anyways, but he's gonna have to hold off there. But what's going on, Mitchell? I haven't talked to you in a while.
Yeah, not too much. Been staying busy with politics as usual.
Right on. So, like I say, I'm sure a few of the people already that'll be here already are familiar with you, Mitchell, because we've talked to a few times in the past, of course, during the whole PBC run-up and all that stuff. And of course, I did want to bring other fellow Canadian libertarians. We are a small but very boisterous type of people here in Canada. So I was hoping to bring on a few others as well. And I had John Hicks lined up, but unfortunately, I think it had something to do with his job, called him away, so he's not going to make it with us tonight. I did put it out there if anyone else wants to come. So if there's anyone even in the chat, if we get the opportunity, you're more than welcome to post down there. The problem, of course, once I go live is unless you contact me in a message service, I can't just post the link right up here to send to you. So anyways, but we're going to start the conversation first and foremost, because obviously every one of us here as libertarians, or just as human beings in general, freedom of speech. I mean, what is more important? I would ask anybody, what's more important in terms of your fundamental freedoms than your ability to speak freely, right? That to me, that is so fundamental. I don't know how anyone, no matter what side of the political divide or spectrum you align with, or maybe you don't align with any political party at all, but I can't believe there's anyone who's actually thinking critically about this issue who actually would advocate for or support having their voices silenced or suppressed, unless you're foolish or naive enough to believe that it's always the other guy, right? They're never going to come after me. They're just going to go after Bennett or Keith or Mitchell. So yeah, I don't care, because I don't like those guys anyways, right? I kind of get that, but the problem with these people with that kind of mentality is it's never just, once they've gotten rid of us, well, what? They got, guys or girls, whichever they are, that like to, use that authoritarian hammer all the time. Well, once you've gotten rid of 3 nails like me and Keith and Mitchell, well, listen, they're going to be looking for more and more nails, right? So I don't know why anyone would support it, and I'm definitely certain that no one within, not just the guests on this live stream, but anyone that's actually watching it, I'm pretty sure nobody supports it. So who are these people that are supporting? I can't even imagine liberals, the supporters of liberals earlier on, even some of the young people that thought, if I vote for the liberals, I'll be able to smoke weed. Right? I can't even imagine those folks are happy with this kind of imposition. What are you guys saying? Now, you go ahead first there, Keith. Just let us know what you're thinking about this initially.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, I did see one person supportive of it on somebody's Facebook feed, and it was a really strange logic. And he was saying, well, like the CRTC, really what this bill is doing is ensuring Canadian content. I'm like, did you read the bill? Like,
yeah.
Yeah, it's wacky. And I remember the first time I watched, I forget the minister's name. I don't really want to know his name, but I watched him trying to justify it. And he said, well, you know, I'm a parent to several kids, and the internet's very, very dangerous out there. So we have to have these tools in our belts. And I'm thinking, you know, I've got 2 teenage boys. Why don't, instead of trying to control our lives, why don't you go home and parent your kids and teach them how to be responsible human beings?
Right? That is the most shocking part for me, is especially the parents with this constant, you know, posing those kind of responsibilities on some external factor or government or anyone else. Like, yeah, whatever happened to personal responsibility? I know when I was raising my kids, and they were raised on the wild, wild west of the internet, when there was literally a free-for-all, right? And I never had any concerns. But you know why I never had any concerns? Because I was proactive as a parent to make sure I did what I could do as best as I could to raise well-adjusted, moral, and decent human beings. That, yes, they're going to, you know, they're going to make mistakes. They're going to do things from time to time. But rather than using the authoritarian method, I like to lead by example and let people learn from mistakes. And you know what? Most times that works best for human beings. You know, you come down with the heavy hand of government, or like when you're a child with the parent, using the heavy-handed tactics, you know, as a parent. Well, most parents that's ever raised kids under those manners or that auspices realize that, yeah, it doesn't work out too well, does it? You end up with very, very rebellious kids, and for a reason, right? And to me, I kind of missed out on that. Why? Because my kids didn't really have too much to rebel against. I mean, they're always trying to find little bits, right? Because that's kind of what it is, especially when you're in the teenage years. But I've always found that if you treat your kids, or just like in society, stretch that out to the macro concept, if you treat people with dignity and respect, yes, there's always going to be little things that are going to happen. It's like, oh, no, I don't have control. But for the most part, it works out beneficial for everyone involved. I can't imagine the kind of short-term thinking that's going through these people, well, especially Jill Ball and the liberals here. But I know what it's all about, right? It's all about, you know, maintaining a narrative and basically silencing and suppressing anyone else. But that's the thing. Even the people that know that, even the supporters, if you realize that your team or your tribe or your gang, the only way they can win is if they, you know, basically, you know, handcuff and shackle everyone else. Well, do you really chalk that up as a win? That's another question I would pose to these people. Not much of a win, right? If the only way you can, you know, beat down your opponent is if you tie both hands and feet behind their back and just have a free for all with them. And I don't consider that fair in any way. What's up with all these people who do support Trudeau, that love that? And that's another thing that I want to point out, and then I'll pass it off and let Mitchell kind of respond to this. But I've never seen the people that I see out there who are the most vocal in terms, and I mean saying some really nasty, derogatory stuff. I've been the brunt of many of them, these liberal supporters, right? Or NDB. It's you folks. I'd be worried more, if I were you, I'd be worried about your voices being silenced a lot more than mine, because I am one of those people, I try to mind my P's and Q's, right? And do things. I try to present myself in a manner that I don't know if I would necessarily be affected as bad as some people in this country, but I'm obviously overly concerned because there's always the potential, or whether it's me or not, that's the point of a principle, right? If I believe in freedom of speech, it's not because it'll affect me, it's because it'll affect anybody. That's the point of having a principled position, is it's not just about me, it's about anyone else, even the people that I can't stand or can't stand me. Anyways, what do you think about that, Mitchell?
I think it's kind of ironic when you mentioned that the liberal people that voted for Justin Trudeau were, oh, we're going to have weed, but now you're going to lose your guns, now you're going to lose your free speech. And it's like, I don't know, like I've made a little summary here, and I have to laugh at the overview of the bill, and it says, Bill C-10 amends the Broadcasting Act. The Act sets out the broadcasting policy for Canada and the roles and powers of Canadian radio, television, and telecommunications in regulating and supervising the broadcasting system, and the mandate for the CBC. The Act plays an important role in supporting Canada's cultural industries and ensuring Canadian content is available and accessible. Which content? Because if you're going to say leftist content, because there's a misconception. I've been correcting people. People say liberals. I don't know where the Canadian liberals are at, because when I think liberal, I think classical liberals, not these Justin Trudeau liberals who are so close to the NDP, they may as well merge their parties together. But, you know, Jagmeet Singh did come out today and say he's not going to support this bill. He's going to work with the Conservative Party, apparently, and make sure it doesn't violate any of our freedoms. But well, it already is. If it's already been tabled.
He didn't say he was going to support the bill. He was going to support it going back for another charter review because of the clause that they took out. And the clause that they just sort of tried to sneak away out of the bill was that they were going to be able to start regulating YouTube channels. Which, to be honest, the way YouTube's going, they're regulating themselves just fine and censoring the heck out of everybody.
Yeah, and let me just point out. Yeah, sorry, what's that?
I mean, even Twitter's gone to the extent. I mean, I remember when the Trump ban happened on Twitter. Everyone's like, oh, it's only Donald Trump. No one else is going to be affected. Well, I have never posted a single thing about Donald Trump on Twitter, and I lost half my followers in like 3 days. I know plenty of right-wingers that lost, libertarians, conservatives, social conservatives, lost a crap ton of following. My analytics were way down on all my platforms, and they still are. So I don't even. And as crazy as Alex Jones is, why are we banning Alex Jones? If he's that crazy, people aren't going to listen to him anyway. Let people say their stuff.
Yeah. Well, I just want to do a little, as far as, because we covered like the Liberals and the NDP, and obviously any of the political parties that identify as the left. We know at this point in time, at this junction, that, you know, whether they're playing politics with it, they're more than willing to support, suppress, and or silence voices that disagree with them. We've seen the kind of the collectivists. I mean, that is the kind of their go-to motif, anyways, right? But let's not leave it at the conservatives here. Now, even with O'Toole and some of the bad be pushed. And part of the Conservative Party under the Harper regime. Let's not forget, and I try on a regular basis to make sure that Canadians don't forget about Bill C-51 and the fact that it's the Harper regime. Now, it was used, or I don't know if you remember even Vic Tays. Remember that? They were going to use the pretense of basically doing more online censorship or regulating or controlling what people say. And they used the pretense of, well, you don't want, you know, like pedophiles. Remember they were using, Vic Tays or whatever? He was using the pretense of the pedophiles. Now, of course, Canadians overwhelmingly who identify as, you know, liberal or leftist or NDP, they were more than quick. And you can see the media, all of them. They were all lined up together. Railing, I was really proud of the fact. It was like, this is great to see Canadians railing against the Harper regime, the Conservatives, for daring strict on our inherent and fundamental rights and freedoms, right? But now I'm seeing today that you know, it's no different, and this is what we've been we libertarians have been pointing out for a long time. You know, the libcon duopoly, it's real, folks. It's left and right. Stop looking in these binary terms in terms of left and right, and look at it in terms of authoritarian versus libertarian. Do you care about your freedoms, or do you want to impose your will on your? That's really what it comes down to. Me, it's not left or right. I don't give a shit if I talk to my neighbor. It doesn't matter if they say, "Oh, I'm conservative, liberal, NDP, or a Green Party." I don't care. You want to use government as a means to suppress me or my voice or anyone else in this country. That's what I care about. And if you say yes, doesn't matter which side of the aisle you claim to come from, it makes you on the wrong side of freedom and the wrong side of liberty. What do you say, Keith?
Well, and that's the thing. The Conservatives are just upset that they're not in the middle of this emergency that we're in, because they would do it as much or worse as the Liberals are doing, and like that's the thing that people need to realize is, like you said, it's whichever one of those major parties is in power, they're going to use it to maintain and increase control. And at what point are we going to stand up and say no? Because they'll be divisive against each other, and conservatives say, well, we would never do that, but absolutely they would do this, and as bad or worse.
Yeah. And I mean, since we are on the topic and talk about politics, and we've covered most of the parties, the only couple parties that I would say that might be pushing back against this would be, of course, the Libertarian Party of Canada. But we also have, I'm sure, once again, I've had a bit of a falling out with the PPC folks, but I'm sure there's got to be a substantial portion. And I'll pass this over to Mitchell because he's a little bit more, you know, in depth with knowledge in terms of some of the PPC people. Because, like I say, I've been thrown under the proverbial bus because I just won't go along to get along, and I am very staunchly independent. And the only place I seem to find a home is other like-minded people like myself, and that's in the Libertarian Party. The PBC, and Mitchell knows this. I was a founding member as well. I was looking. I mean, I was just like, even Tim, anybody. I think we were all desperate. Is there any possible political party in this country that can gain any traction in terms of support and freedom and liberty? And like I say, I jumped on board at the time, tried my best to help out, and I'm not even going to get into the whole internal divisions and stuff, but I do recognize at the very least that those who comprise the membership or supporters of PBC, I'm fairly certain that they're all on board with the rest of us in terms of pushing back against this bill as well. I would suggest that's the key position, the key stance that most members and supporters of the PBC are taking at today, I would say. Right, Mitchell, what would you say?
Yeah, that's correct. We, the People's Party, do not want Bill C-10 to pass. We've already started a petition on all our social media to get rid of it. I think it was up to like 12,000, 14,000 signatures right now. I don't know why people are agreeing to this bill. And like I don't think it's a partisan. It's not a partisan issue. It's a moral issue. It's a values issue. And I know people, I'm not going to mention names, I know people on the NDP and the Green and the Liberals that don't support this bill, like members, but they're not talking about it. They don't want to be shunned from their elitist party. I think we need to drop the party lines on this issue. There's certain things you kind of hold the party line on, like economics, but when it comes to freedom of speech and liberty and freedom, it shouldn't be a political issue, it's a moral issue. And I know just from a People's Party stand, we don't want Bill C-10. A little further, we're believing in we don't want lockdowns anymore. I know that's on the COVID topic, it's a little off topic, but I mean, it's the same principle. Let people be personally responsible. If you're sick and you feel sick, stay at home. Like, don't go around to old people that are going to get sick. I mean, we can look at Texas, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi. They're completely open. There's no lockdowns. And the mainstream media, they're going to skyrocket in cases. Texas has lower cases per capita right now than we do in Atlantic Canada, and they haven't been locked down for 2 months.
Trust me, Mitchell, I'm right there with you on the COVID thing. We're trying. Let's stick to the C-10 because this is really, really important. But I definitely want to get a position. Yeah, go ahead, Keith, because
I want to know why nobody.
And Keith is going to be, hopefully be the leader, and what position and stance you'll be using in terms of promoting the BC Libertarian Party over there.
Yeah, and I think what we need to come out strongly is not just that we're against Bill C-10, is that we should be actually passing, there's not really very many good laws, but we should be passing laws that censorship is illegal, so that the YouTubes and the Twitters and the Facebooks aren't doing censorship in Canada, because we don't want to turn it to China, and that's what's really getting very dangerous. So at the Kelowna Mega Rally on Saturday, there's some really good speakers, really good reasoned speakers. There wasn't a lot of, everyone thinks these rallies are full of a bunch of crazies, and of course there's some there. I mean, I show up once in a while, but with very good reasoned speeches. He put it on his YouTube channel, got 3 views, and then it was down, and he's like, I can't take a chance, and he took down all the rest of his other videos, and now he's trying to find where he can broadcast, and how dangerous is that? Even if 90% of what the people were saying at that rally was disinformation or false, there might be 10% of something that's good there. And so who decides what's truth? And that's what scares me. Nobody should be deciding what's truth except ourselves.
Yeah, well, let me just throw this out right now, because I recognize by heaven, like I say, and both of you gentlemen, well, you do, I would imagine, you do, Mitchell, right? As far as you would identify as a libertarian, correct?
Correct.
Right. So this is, and you know what, and even though you're still a supporter, and I believe you're even a candidate for the PBC, you know what I think? All it takes, as we know, I think we all recognize this point in time, especially after the last election, and we've heard this mentioned many, many times, not just by myself and Tim. I'm sure Keith said. I'm sure you might have said it, and we've heard it from Andrew Breitbart himself, right? Politics being downstream of culture and stuff. So what I recognize is it's not that whether it's the PBC or the Libertarian Party. Obviously, we recognize we're not going to go out there and necessarily win any particular election anytime soon. Well, I mean, that's possible. Anything, I shouldn't say never, because there's always that possibility, right? But it does seem like a far-fetched concept at this particular junction in Canada, right? But what I will say, this is one area. This is one area where I think it's really important. And even I'm saying this even to myself here, and I'm willing to lead by example. And this is an area where we should all, like, whether you're a PPC supporter or a supporter of the Libertarian Party of Canada, like I say, let's show. I mean, to me, I think the best thing that could possibly happen is not just, Maxime Bernier showing up from here or there, but how about, like I say, people making an actual point, whereas, PPC supporters, members of maybe the Libertarian Party, when you're out at these rallies, make these kinds of messaging cohesive, right? So that people recognize it's not so much about voting per se, but it's showing that there's a growing grassroots movement. And because it does come from, even if it has to come from a multitude of parties, whether it's the Libertarian Party or, like I say, the PPC, if these are people that are definitely staunch defenders of freedom and liberty. So, like I say, if we could show some form of coalition, put our petty differences aside temporarily, to be a genuine show of force against this, so that we can send Canadians a message that we want to change the culture. Now, we are giving you political options, of course, but at the very least, you're seeing some cohesion from people that might have some disagreements, some infighting even, but we're showing, and that's why I say all the time, is leading by example, that we're willing to put these petty differences aside in the times and the moments where it's vitally needed and necessary to do so. What do you think of that idea?
I think it's fantastic, and that kind of goes to the story of how I came upon the Libertarian Party. Like a couple of federal elections ago, I just got completely fed up by this divisive politics, the marketing, it's this issue or that issue. This politician's a criminal. This one's a criminal, and I was like, what is going on? Like, this doesn't make any sense. So I just kind of gave up, and I just didn't pay attention to any kind of politics at all. I was actually like, well, maybe I could start my own party called the Get Shit Done Party or something, and just kind of clean this thing up and get some real people. And then, when John Horgan was calling his illegal election last fall, that's when I really, I've been a libertarian my whole life. I just didn't know there was a name for it.
Exactly.
And I think that's a lot of people, and they just don't understand it, and they don't understand. Not everyone, but most people don't really want to be controlled. They don't want to be told what to do. There certainly is this percentage of the population that loves it. Tell me what to do, and I'm going to be happy. But and I think that's the message that we have to continue to promote. Is it's not about these left and right wing issues and the policy issues. And it really just all comes down to freedom. And when you bring it down to that basic level, honestly, I think it resonates with most people.
Yeah,
I would agree with that. Go ahead there, Mitchell.
Yeah, I agree. I think it does come down to freedom, but I think sadly, I don't think people with Africa, I don't think they want to be controlled. I think it's just they're sadly brainwashed by mainstream media and the people that are pushing these ideas of reducing freedom and liberty and more government control and more centralized planning. These people that tend to vote for these parties, they probably can't tell you the difference in the policy, and the ones that can, it makes them feel comfortable. When you say, I want freedom and liberty and free markets and small government, they're like, oh no, what's going to happen if this happens? Well, the world hasn't always been big government. Prior to World War II, it was a very small government society, and people got along great. It's this divisive, and it's like I said, it's not a left or right issue like you guys have been saying. I agree, and I think if we reach out to people, that may vote NDP or Liberal, and we can say, like, reach out to them not from the party line, but from a moral standpoint of freedom. And, do you want to lose this? Because if you lose this, what else are they going to take from you? Because we've seen it in history. The government starts controlling the media. They take your guns. They take your free speech. What's left to take? I mean, you're a slave to the society.
Well,
every country.
Actually, just real quick, let me just point out, because you're talking about, speaking of the guns thing, I don't know if you guys have seen, and anyone's watching the stream there, I'm just going to bring this up real quick, but it turns out that the RCMP kept a copy of the long gun registry, even when it was supposed to be destroyed under the Harper regime. I don't know if you've seen that. I think that was a Toronto Sun article that I posted up. You can find that on one of my social media pages. But yeah, that's another big thing. But yeah, well, the big thing, like you were saying about the left, right, and kind of what I was referenced to, and maybe Keith can refer to this as well, is yes, it's not about, and I think that's the biggest detriment to having party politics, because just like this gentleman here, Tame Thing, that pointed out here, Stop Censorship, Defeat Bill C-10 is a video from Pierre Poilievre with a link in the description so you can help stop the bill. This is the thing about, which is, I think, the thing that really drives me nuts, grinds my gears in terms of party politics, rather than individuals, right? Because Pierre Poilievre, now, even though he is a conservative and he's an MP within the Conservative Party of Canada, I would consider Pierre Poilievre, I mean, whether he considers himself a minarchist, libertarian, or a conservative, whatever, but the man, he's someone that he's a fellow traveler in so many ways. Like when I hear the man speak, and it's a shame that he actually has to function within the party system, where someone that has such a dominant voice and has the kind of says the things that resonates with not just libertarians, but I'm sure a lot of people from both sides of the political spectrum or any area of it, has to sit down, shut up, and allow whatever the political boss or the whip to have control. That's the thing. He gets to say what he wants to say, but can he ever bring anything to the forefront and make that a policy position or stance? No, because he still has to be subjected to the leadership or the party position. And that's the part that drives me nuts about party politics. I would love now, if I lived in the riding of Pierre Poilievre and I recognized there was no one else in there, then yeah, forget about the man in terms of what party he belongs to. But if he's willing to stand in defense of your freedoms, it would be a great idea to support him. But the problem is, once again, this is not how Canadian parliamentary politics works, and that's a sad reality, which is why it's so hard. No matter what you got, even people that are on the inside are not really much help you. So it just kind of shows you that there's not a whole lot that politics can do in terms of getting us out from under this mess. This is the area where, once again, we have to truly affect the culture. And the culture of Canada, like I say, I don't know if it's necessarily representative, but the media, the way they're portraying or presenting it, and of course the kind of comments that we see on outlets such as the CBC or CTV, it does seem that there's a preponderance of Canadians, or at least a plurality of them, that seem to revel in this. And I can't help but think it's not that they actually genuinely support, someone putting duct tape over their mouth, but I have to believe because they feel these are people I firmly believe in my mind. The only reason why they would support any of these stances or positions or this bill C-10 is because they believe that it's only to, like I started out, it's only because they feel that they are in the majority and it's only going to affect their opponents. But I don't know how else, maybe you can help me out here, Keith. How else can we explain to people, let's say I was going to go with my neighbor or my coworker or any friends of mine or someone, what's the best way to explain them that, yeah, it's not just going to affect me, right? It will eventually come to affect even you or someone that you care about.
Yeah, I think I like the approach that Michelle Rempel took, and again, another person that I respect. And again, she's handcuffed by the Conservative Party, and it's actually one of the reasons I didn't want to ever join one of the major parties, because you get in and then you have no effect and you're kind of stuck in the, like I know the BC Liberal Party, which is our right-wing party here, there's so much control in there by Christy Clark when she was in charge, but I like what Michelle Rempel said, and she said, and again, like any law that you're putting in, any board I've been on, even company policies, they have to stand the test of time. And if you're doing it just for this situation, do you trust every future leader with this law? Like, ask them, would you trust Stephen Harper with that law? Would you trust Maxime Bernier with that law? Would you trust me with that law? I wouldn't want that law because I think I'm fairly incorruptible, but why have that law and give somebody the chance to do that? Because human beings are corruptible, and that's why any law of the land should prevent the government from taking away your liberties, not give them the power. Because in the next election somebody comes in and they're like, ooh, look at this law I got, right on, what can we do?
Yeah, I think that's actually a great way to do it. Is, and I think you would probably agree with that as well, Mitchell, is if you're using, like if you're talking to someone and like say they vote for Liberal, of course that means you have to understand, their political leanings and persuasion. But at the same time, if you did know it was someone that voted left or Liberal, and you said, would you be comfortable with Stephen Harper, right? I'm quite certain that your typical Liberal or NDP or Green voter is like, hell no, right? Because that's the thing, just like Keith has suggested, that, yeah, if you perceive that as coming from, your opponents politically, then you're definitely going to be against it. What are you saying on that side of it, Mitchell?
No, I agree. I think it's, goes back, like I said, I think it's best to just, give them, the issue. I mean, I've talked to socialists, and a lot of them somehow want freedom, when I don't know how that happens, because after a while socialism turns to communism. But I think, if we can reach people, regardless of where you fall the political spectrum, just, boil it down to the basics, and explain what these laws could possibly do, whether it's Bill C-10 or any law. Try to explain to them, what are the long-lasting side effects of these laws, and if someone can become corrupt, do you want them to push that law even further or put new laws that are similar to it and make it worse? Which I think is why we need a smaller government and less regulations, and clean up some of these bills and follow the Constitution and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, because that hasn't been followed since probably Diefenbaker.
Anyways, if you just wanted to respond or say what you got to say there, Keith, while you're doing that, I'm just going to set up an article here from Michael Geist, and I'm probably going to read a little bit from it here after you say a little something there. But this is a guy. Now, I have followed Michael Geist for quite some time now. It was mostly on Twitter, I believe. And anyways, but he is a staunch defender of freedom of speech, and he's written quite a few articles. And he was even on the committee. He had posed some questions, to the Jill Bolt in terms of talking about Bill C-10. But I just wanted to, like I say, or if you just want me to go ahead there now, I just kind of wanted to.
Yeah, I can jump in just real quick. And I think one of the things that people have to realize is the government has been controlling the media and the message for decades. And they're very good at it, right? Because they start to kind of lead things in kind of a month before they want to say it. They release some polls, like suddenly 78% of Canadians want a vaccine passport. They don't really know what the question was. They don't show what the opposite side of the question was. It's like, three out of 4 dentists recommend Crest. Well, they don't only recommend Crest. And that's the manipulation that's been going on anyway. And if you give them an extra control to control the message, whoever's in power, then you can never get rid of them. And then they already believe they have a mandate just because they won an election, which is not what democracy is all about. And then you give them just that extra step, and they're just gonna, hey, yeah, we're elected. You guys voted us in, and so we're gonna do whatever we want. And it's a dangerous place to go. And I try to bring people back down to just some very basic things, because if they get into this, well, I'm on the Trudeau team and you're on the other team, you're never gonna be able to have a conversation, and back down to the fundamentals of does this feel right?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know what's going on here, but I'm having an issue trying to. There we go. Computer's acting slow tonight, so folks, sorry about that. Actually, this is one of the times where the streams. What's crazy? The streams would probably have more participation, more activity later in the evening, because that's when more people have opportunities to do so. Unfortunately, because I have a terrible internet connection and I'm on ExploreNet, while they have what's called fair access policy, where they basically, it's socialism, right? So they give equally shit internet connection speeds because they don't have enough to spread around, right? So internet's basically like quasi, but unfortunately, so I don't have much in terms of broadband, and the evenings are the worst. But anyways, like I say, I did want to just reference this article from Michael Geist and just read a little bit from it for you folks. Maybe we can kind of deal with a little bit subsequent here. Just one second. Okay, here we are. Where did that baby go? Okay, so here it is. So this is the headline on it is why the Liberals have become the most anti-internet government in Canadian history. This was posted on April 16th, 2021, like I say, by Michael Geist from michaelgeist.ca. The Liberals, led by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, were first elected in 2015 on a platform that emphasized transparency. The signs were everywhere. It released ministerial mandate letters to demonstrate transparency, renamed the Minister of Industry to the Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development to point to the importance of an innovative economy. And soon after that, the cabinet was sworn in, Canadians were awash in public consultations. I recall participating in an almost instant consult on the Trans-Pacific Partnership, with promises of entrenching net neutrality, prioritizing innovation, focusing on privacy rather than surveillance, and supporting freedom of expression. The government left little doubt about its preferred policy approach. Imagine that, a political party that made a whole bunch of promises and then went completely against it. Imagine that happening, right? As I watched Canadian Heritage Minister Stephen Guilbeault yesterday close the Action Summit to combat online hate, right? Online hate, that's the pretense. I was left with whiplash as I thought back to those early days. Today's Liberal government is unrecognizable by comparison, as it today stands the most anti-internet government in history. And that's a bold statement, folks, but I believe he's actually accurate and bang on. As it moves to create the great Canadian internet firewall, I believe there's another country on this planet that has a big, giant internet firewall, right? Oh, yeah, China. And let's not
North
forget
Korea.
that Justin Trudeau did say he's a big fan of China's basic dictatorship, right?
Mhm.
24, I believe
Anyway,
he said that.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I watched that recently. Yeah, he's saying how amazing it would be to be a dictator because you could implement policies quicker.
Yeah, it's true. And the crazy part, I remember the audience that was sitting there was a bunch of ladies. I don't know if it was a feminist group or what. I don't think there was a sausage among the whole. It was a vag fest from for as far as she can see. But I did see that when he said that he admired the basic dictatorship, I did see a really, really huge applause line. I don't know if there was a big applause freaking screen flashing for them. But they seem to be quite happy when he said that. That's a weird thing. But I also recognize that if it was a feminist group, that feminists, right, and nothing against women, I love my wife a lot, right, but and lots of other women in my life. But I do understand that feminism, which that's the thing. If you understand these things, it is a collective ideology on its own that seeks to impose its will on others. So I kind of understand how they might, be fans or support Trudeau when he said such a ridiculous thing. But anyways, let me finish just a little bit more here. Net neutrality is out and mandated internet blocking is in. Freedom of expression and due process, that's gone. Bye-bye. Quick takedowns without independent review and increased liability rate. So I guess they're going the YouTube, Facebook route. What? Ripping a page out of social media platforms, policies, and procedures? Seems like it. Innovation and news business models are out. CRTC regulation is in. Privacy reform, bye-bye. Internet taxation. Yeah, don't forget about that, folks, because that's another layer of this Bill C-10 is, now you're going to have increased cost on everything that you consume as well, because, there's going to be a tax on that, right? And, hashtag taxation is theft, by the way. Prioritizing consumer internet access and affordability, that's out. Reduce competition through mergers, it's in. And perhaps most troublingly, consultation and transparency are out and secrecy is in. Now, anyways, like I say, I won't read too much more from this, but I will link this in the description of the stream below for you folks to check it out. Because like I say, Michael Geist is someone that's, like I say, is quite an advocate and a staunch advocate of freedom of speech, and thankfully so, because there are quite a few other things I probably wouldn't agree with him on. But like I say, this is another area where we as Canadians, this is a perfect example, once again, where we can all come together, put our petty differences aside, and can we at least for once show that we can do this? I think this would be this is an amazing opportunity. And if we could take advantage of this, then once Canadians, if we could just do this one thing, then Canadians could see, oh, look, if we can come together to defend this specific part of our freedoms and our inherent rights and liberties, then maybe there's other areas where we can do the same. I think this is the springboard. If we're going to bring about liberty in this country, I believe Bill C-10 and the fact that I believe both of you guys are correct, that most Canadians will want to push back and fight against us. I think this is the springboard we need to try to find some cohesion and some way for Canadians to come together. And hopefully, like I say, that will happen.
Well, I'll add on to what you have there. So I've been following this one since about August. So there's a page on the Government of Canada website called the Online Disinformation Call for Proposals. It's the Digital Citizen Contribution Program, they call it. And so they're calling for proposals and they're going to fund. And one example real quick here is projects that aim to understand the role of algorithms, AI, and other system-level factors on mainstream and fringe online platforms.
Hey, Keith, before you continue on, do you not? I believe you should have the opportunity. I think you do, don't you? Do you have the opportunity to share it on the screen if you want on your side?
Oh, yeah, I think so.
If you want, you can go ahead, or you don't even have to. Like I said, I'm sorry for interrupting you, but I just did want to point out, if you wanted to share something, I believe the StreamYard has made it. I'm not seeing anything.
Oh, hold on, Chrome tab.
Yeah, they've made it into two now. Yeah, Chrome tab, and then I believe.
Okay, there we go.
There you go.
Yeah, so projects that aim to understand AI, system level factors. And here's what I mainstream and fringe online platforms. They're trying to get AI to capture, spread, and uptake and impacts of disinformation and related harm. They're trying to understand domestic and transnational spread of online disinformation. And it goes on and on. There's a bunch of links here to protecting democracy, enhancing citizen preparedness, and it could be the most genuine reason for doing this. But again, it comes down to somebody somewhere is deciding what is truth and what is disinformation. And I use a very simple example often. Like, do you remember back in the day when eggs were bad for you and there was cholesterol in the eggs, and then if you ate eggs, you're gonna die, and people, scientists were saying, doctors were saying, no, that's not actually true, and they did some tests. But imagine no, this is the truth of the day, and we're going to censor everybody who's trying to say that eggs are healthy for you.
Yeah. Well, I can do even one better than that, because I also remember the day. Now I'm a little bit young, so I had to actually watch some older videos right online because I wasn't privy to it as a child. But I remember even, this would have been something that boomers are definitely very much privy to and probably remember and recollect quite readily is, smoking's great. Doctors have approved Camel, right? Yeah, hey, I'm a doctor. And, so of course this whole pretense, right? We know how many times, people's attitudes, mentality, their position, their stance, or even science, has never truly settled in quite such a manner that the media puts it, right? And that's the thing that people need to understand, is even when you're talking about science, is there's a scientific method, right? But science isn't an ideology. It's so weird when you hear people talking about science. I think they're confusing science with scientism, right? Or what's that one that the Hollywood celebs are into, right? It's like that's not the same, folks, right? Science is basically a methodology. That's what science is. Science is a methodology, and you have to be able to reproduce that kind of methodology, right? In independent studies and fields. I should be able to do it, and you should be able to. Just like if I say 2 + 2 is 4, all by itself in BC, I can do it on the other side of Canada, and it'll work out. We both end up with the same, right? That's what science is. It's not a consensus in terms of an ideology. It's a consensus if it's based and grounded in objective reality and fact, right? But that's the problem, the way people are presenting information today. And I've seen this. You guys must have noticed this too, especially since COVID. I know it used to get tossed around a little bit, but I've never seen the term experts thrown around so much in the last year. Like, it's fucking insane. Every article or every second article that comes out of CBC or CTV, it's bringing in some expert. It's like, really though? I mean, expert. I mean, there's all kinds of experts, but how come it's weird that all your experts all agree to go on the CBC and say whatever the CBC wants to say? That's weird. Are you telling me there's no such thing as any experts that may disagree? It doesn't seem that way. If you're watching CBC, you would swear every expert on the planet, right?
Well, I was talking.
That's not true. Go ahead.
Sorry. I was talking to a journalist at the Freedom Rally where I spoke. I am, in some ways, an expert on pandemics. I used to write software for the Center for Disease Control to help train them for pandemics.
Oh, nice.
And anyways, I was talking to the journalist after, and I actually called them out in my talk, and I said, you guys aren't reporting on this stuff very well at all. Like, it's the anti-mask rally. We call it the Freedom Rally. And they go, the so-called Freedom Rally, in quotes. Well, you don't call it the so-called BLM rally. And I said to them, like, journalism is dead, and like it's media's turned into clickbait robots, and all they're trying to do is get the press release out as fast as possible so they can get on Facebook, get their ad revenue. And he agreed with me. And I said, well, what's happening? Why is there no journalism happening anymore? And he said, a lot of it is the young journalists are trying to make their name, right? So they're going to go to one of these rallies and they're going to find the most outrageous sign that they possibly can. They're going to, one global reporter here, he went in the middle of the crowd and started demanding 6 feet from everybody. And then he got a little bit of a shove. And so, but he's doing this because he's trying to make a name for himself. So they'll pick the headline that they think is going to get them the most Facebook likes. And that's not journalism.
Yeah.
And they're not going to bite the hand that feeds them. As long as the government's funding the mainstream media, they're going to go along with the narrative as long as they can. It's what, $1.3 billion every year gets sent to the CBC, and you see it all the time. But a lot of people. I saw this bill coming. You've seen it right from the basics. You've seen it in high schools with censorship. No, you can't say that. You're going to offend someone in your classroom. Universities need safe space. It was only a matter of time before someone in power jumped on this authoritarian idea. Let's limit what people say, limit what people can do. And, even like you look at Parler come out and they get blamed for everything. Like, it's the riots. They're all far right extremists. This is the problem. We're going to ban Parler. So big tech bans Parler. Parler's back now, but it's still extremely limited. And it's like, I know people on Parler. I'm on Parler. I never saw a Donald Trump tweet about someone raiding the Capitol building and anything like that. So, it's baffling to me, and I wish more people would just kind of see the big picture of what's going on.
Well, the other thing that I think the big part, well, I mean, we're going to get to the actual where it's affecting independent content creators such as you or I, because this is the part that obviously is kind of resonating with me, because I recognize that it's looking like, and I've already recognized another thing is, I've noticed my social media presence has already been greatly affected. Right now, I know there's some other factors that play into it, so I don't go into the whole thing that government's the only reason why my social media presence has decreased. There's probably multiple reasons, contributing factors there, but I definitely see that it's been greatly affected in recent times. Now, but before we even get to that point, what I would suggest, and before, like, the whole point of content creators or what people are allowed to upload to YouTube or social media platforms, to me, and you were referencing this earlier, I don't know if it was you or Keith or Mitchell, but in terms of, we've already been, CRTC has already had a big fucking hand in terms of what we're allowed to consume on the airwaves or the television or radio, right? And that's another part that kind of drives me nuts, is the whole point as treating people as, individuals, as adults, which we all are, is I should be allowed, I'm a fucking human being, right? Who in the hell thinks that they should have any right or authority to dictate to me what I'm allowed to watch or see? Right? That is I think that's almost as disturbing to me as an adult human being as it is for someone to say that I want to silence your voice. They also want to not just silence my voice, but protect me from what I see or hear. That's fucking. I should, as a sovereign individual, adult human being, I should be able to consume whatever the hell I damn well choose to without some central planner or government organization dictating or controlling what I'm allowed to see. I mean, that already has enough implications, and that's the restrictive part of it. But then there's also the part of, no wonder Canadians always fucking go to the U.S. to achieve any or attain any success, because if you're in Canada, just like with my youngest son, when he graduated, everyone in his class got some kind of award. Now, if you're a really competent person, whether you're in his classroom and you did all straight A's, or you're someone in Canada that wants to be a media personality, do you want someone to just constantly be fucking giving you, free handouts or participation rate trophies? You'll never know how competent you are, right? That's the thing. How does this kind of shit could only possibly appeal to people who are the biggest fucking losers on the planet, that needs someone to prop them up to make them feel good, because it sure shit would never appeal to someone that actually, I love competition, and I don't even mind losing, because competition, if I lose, it means, I've got to learn, I've got to improve, I'm going to try to do better. But if I never have to improve myself because government can arbitrarily prop me up, right, against my competitor, like I said, I don't know how that's appealing, but I do recognize in Canada, and it's a sad thing to say as a Canadian, that there are a lot of fucking Canadians that have that kind of envy and resentment, and rather than try to strive to be successful, they'd rather strive to use government to bring others down to create some kind of level playing field. What a sad reality.
Competition breeds success and innovation. Without it, there's no drive. It's like, it goes back to that, it's a little off of like free schooling. Well, if it's going to be free, what's the point of going? You can just go to school and didn't like it and held the seat. Now you quit and go do something else. There's no initiative to do more. And, I don't get the whole participation medal thing. Like, either you win or you lose. If you lose, you shouldn't have a little piece of ribbon that says, "Oh, you did all right, Johnny. Here's your participation." Like, you're enabling them to essentially wait for someone to hand them something. And sadly, the government has taken advantage of those people and gives them whatever they want.
Yeah, I don't know why.
They give them too much, I should say. They give them too much.
Yeah, I don't know why we've come to this point in society where we're happy with mediocrity for everybody. And I'm not saying leave anybody behind, but if you're not letting the people who are the innovators and the people that are excelling rise to the top, then that's a huge problem. And just back to the censorship thing a little bit too. I watched this video from Rebel News from a while back where they got banned from their YouTube channel for a week, and something similar happened to me where Facebook went back months into my posts and they found an article that I had posted. One of them was for sure I knew that it was false information. I was just trying to get a rise out of people. The second one was an opinion piece from the Wall Street Journal, and I shared something from a credible news source, and you're now deprioritizing my page. I can't even change the name of my Facebook page anymore right now. And what happened with them is they went back several months, and there was a news story where they showed that little Trump video on the so-called insurrection that was going on, and all major media sources played that clip. But so that's the issue. If we get bills like this, is somebody can go back and comb through years and years of history and they find one thing that they don't like, and it's like, oh, you're banned for a week and you're gone. And like I think it was all of their other videos are unviewable. They couldn't communicate with their fan base, and so they're moving to some of the different platforms. And love or hate Rebel News, I think sometimes they're over the top, but sometimes they're showing things that that people need to see. And that's I post something from Rebel News and people are like, oh, that's a right-wing media source, I'm not watching that. I'm like, fine, that's your choice, but to exclude
so you'll watch the socialist CBC and get the same biased narrative.
Oh yeah, like you watch the difference between how Rebel News covered the Montreal protest, over 100,000 people on the weekend, and how CBC covers it, and they're just like, shame, 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 and they're causing COVID, and like, yeah, it's maddening. So we have to have alternative views, and if you don't like it, just don't watch it.
Exactly. And I gotta say, as much as there's times I've been
I'll watch it
in the past. There's been times where I definitely disagree with Ezra and some of his media personalities on Rebel News, but I gotta tell you, I am so impressed, because even though we have the CCF, right, the Canadian Constitution Foundation, and the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, we have a couple, these organizations who are supposed to be staunch defenders and stand up in the legal positions, right, against these kind of impositions. I gotta tell you, Rebel News seems to be even punching way above the weight and doing even better in terms of standing in defense. The Fight the Fine initiative that Ezra started, I think was amazing. The fact that they're crowdsourcing, for people to get hire lawyers to help people who fight these fines. Like, this is a great initiative, and I'm really happy to see that Rebel News is stepping up, because once again, and I don't say this willy-nilly, I don't want to cause any harm or insult to the people who are in these organizations, but I found them to be quite weak, to be honest with you. In Canada, I find these organizations seem to be, I don't know if it's they just don't have the proper funding, right? There's just not enough people supporting them. I don't know. I'm not privy to that kind of knowledge, but I do recognize that they seem to be like, what are they, paper tigers almost, right? And even when they push back, and I share their stuff, I've been sharing more and more of their stuff, because I always try to at least, give Canadians the idea that there are some people out here, but even when I read some of their commentary in terms of pushing back, it's almost like begging. Like, it almost sounds like, could you please just not? It's like, no. You got to remember, folks, the people who are in government, the government is forced. These are people, Joe Biden, he's saying, without actually saying, he's saying right under his breath, it's completely part and parcel of what government is I'm not just suggesting it. No, I'm going to impose this on you. If your response is, well, that's probably not a good idea, or try to make the Constitution says this, it's like, wait a minute, you're using a government document to argue against the government. How about you just recognize that humans are rights? This is the problem too with Canadians. Most Canadians, I swear to God, if you went and asked them, they would say, well, where do you get your rights from? Well, it's right there in the Constitution. So I guess government must give you rights. Well, no. All that Constitution is supposed to do is just an acknowledgement. Right? It's like, okay, I acknowledge, right, that we're not a dictatorship in this country. I acknowledge that you folks have inherent and inalienable rights. And we, as government officials, people who are supposed to be in government, we have to, right? This is the whole point is we have to respect these inalienable fundamental rights and freedoms. But that's not how it works in Canada. And the fact that the Constitution, that's the other thing too. The Constitution, you might as well just take the thing and wipe your ass with it, because when you have a notwithstanding clause in it, says, here are all your fundamental rights and freedoms, but we're going to leave a disclaimer that says, but we can override them anytime we want. Like, what's the point of even writing the paper? It's not even worth writing that shit. If you're going to say you have all these rights, but we can take them away whenever we see fit, right?
Yeah, the Charter of Rights. It's very apparent now. Like the courts don't even care. They're going to rubber stamp everything that's happening. The BC Supreme Court told Dr. Henry that yeah, you're violating the Charter of Rights, but we're going to let you get away with it because it seems justified for the cause. And so that document doesn't. It's an illusion of freedom. It makes people feel comfortable. It's like, I think I live in a free country, but you got to remember who was involved in writing that, and that's Pierre Trudeau, when he was probably sitting around the. Not that I don't know that Justin would have been able to pay much attention with who he is, but probably saying, hey, look at all these little holes we got in here. If we ever have to use them, we actually have all the control, and the citizens think that they have freedom, but they don't. And that's the illusion of freedom that we all have in our life.
Yeah. Oh, that's another thing too. So another thing is that I wanted to bring up as well was, it forces a tax on Canadians, when we're consuming content from American sources or corporations. That's the other part. It's one thing when government, right, in your domestic, in your tax farm, right, on your plantation. It's one thing for the government to control and heavy regulate everything you do within the country. But when you're consuming content, and we're doing it through the airwaves or through the internet, right, but when we're consuming content that's produced by Americans, right, I mean, the excuse for property tax, right? The pretense was, well, that's so that you can have some roads. What? I mean, I would just like to hear. I've never heard anyone, not Joe Ball, not Trudeau, none of these politicians. I've never heard anyone offer up an excuse. Well, since these are American corporations, right, in American jurisdictions, well, what is the point of a tax? What's the point of a tax? What service? Like, the service is already provided to us. As a matter of fact, these social media platforms, they're not necessary that they take our data, but we've already entered into a contract and negotiated that by signing up with these terms of agreement. So why in the hell does government feel that they have to use tax? Once again, was the old style of taxation of economically enslaved people. They at least came forth with at least a decent excuse or at least a snake oil salesman tactic that would fool most people. I don't even hear them even putting any effort out there. I've never heard any effort being put forth or any explanation as to why you need to tax them. Like, what's the point other than all I've heard? Now, tell me if I'm wrong here, and maybe one of you guys will push back and give me some clarity here. But all I've heard is we need to force really successful American companies, the most successful companies on the planet, we got to steal from them so that we can prop up some Canadians who are terrible, and they're not successful in any way, but my country, my fields, right? I got to steal from you to prop up someone else. Is that the messaging that they're truly sending to Canadians? I think that's what it is. What do you guys think?
Yeah, that sounds about accurate to me. And just, on the tax thing, I think about this a lot. I was actually reading some stuff with the guy that organizes the freedom rallies here. He hasn't paid income tax in many years. He's been to court 350 times. He argues down to the Magna Carta, and he's trying to say he's not a person under the act. And when did we consent to be taxed? Like, when did I sign a document saying, hello, yes, I would like you to take this tax from me? And it's supposedly a voluntary system, but we have no consent into that. And of course they'll argue that, well, you use all the services. Like, well, I'd love to opt out of the government monopoly of healthcare and do something different, but it's illegal, and there's no other option.
Yeah, that's the thing. We're forced into these monopolies. they're like, well, you have to use our service, therefore you have to pay it. Well, that's the thing. In a free market, wouldn't necessarily be the case, right? You wouldn't have to be forced to support anyone. You would just like in any other type of free market environment, you would choose to go where that's most cost effective, beneficial. You get the best service or product at the best price. That's the thing. But yeah, when you can monopolize any service or product, then of course, right? But that's the thing. Even when they can do that, even with government power that has the ability to manipulate and dictate things in such a manner, they still, think about it, even with all that power, they still have to forcefully redistribute the wealth from how I look at this is, And I'm just going to tell you guys, because I get such minimal views on my videos these days, because I firmly believe that I'm kind of, I'm just not recommended. I think that's what it is. I think mostly I just don't get too much in the recommended. But, at best, if I don't have any super chats, it'll usually take me a month or two to even get the $100, and it's $100 you have to get a payout. So my minuscule, and then when they're talking about they're going to tax incomes, like, really? What's $100 times 12? What, you're going to tax $1,200? I don't even think there's a tax on $1,200 a year. But I'm just saying, you're going to take a portion of my $100 a month, right? Me, and I put in a lot of work and effort. I've even invested in a lot of resources to try to come across in some kind of a professional manner, try to be decent. And what they're going to do, even though I've invested all this, is they want to take my minuscule little bit of and force me to pay for what? Some paid influencer that the big government is already subsidizing, right, to counteract whatever I've got to say. You're going to force me, not only are you going to silence and suppress my voice, but while you're putting your hand over my mouth, you're going to be reaching into my fucking wallet and forcing me to pay my opponents. That's saying the exact opposite thing. It's just like, that is so beyond, that's not just corrupt. I consider that to be quite evil, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. I don't believe in like zero taxes, but I think there has to be minimal taxes. But it'd be nice if I don't know how to explain, but I mean, I don't like the taxation is theft thing. I'm kind of like on the I get the principle, but we have to pay I believe we have to pay some sort of tax. But what we pay in Canada for tax is absolutely absurd. I mean, the government will literally, if you have investments and your stocks or cryptocurrency, anything grows, which the government should have no control over, will say, well, 50% of your capital gains, we're going to tax you. It's like, you didn't, it was my initiative or whoever initiative is investing. Why do you need to benefit off something that I decide to do myself? And it puts you in the next tax bracket, and then you're losing money on tax return, and it's ridiculous. I mean, let's have a fair tax system, have accountability in the tax system, and have more free market ideas. I've heard a lot of Americans say, Canada has socialized healthcare. It's so much better. We don't have to pay out of pocket. And I'm thinking, if you want to wait 4 years to see a doctor and lose 30% of your wages in taxes, and half of that's supposed to go to healthcare, I think it's like 17 or 18% of it's supposed to go to healthcare. Oh, sure, go have it. And they're like, well, yeah, the free market healthcare system is broken. The Americans haven't had a free market healthcare system since the Great Depression.
Exactly.
The insurance companies have gotten better with the lobbyists and the government. There's so much red tape in the American health. It's not a free market anymore. It's the government and insurance companies lining back pockets so they make more money. And the pharmaceutical companies, it's not a free market down there. It's brutal.
Yeah. Well, let me just push back a little bit against you there, Mitchell. And I'll tell you why it's important to do this, because it's all about clarity of mind, right? And clarity of language is what gives you that clarity of mind. And you've probably heard me say this before. I know what you're saying when you say taxation. You're kind of on the fence with the taxation theft because we have service provider. And I kind of get that. And I would listen, trust me, I'd be more than willing, if you want a road so that I can travel to work or go, enjoy my vacation of course I want to pay for a service. I'm not a freeloader. I'm not a free rider. I want to pay. If I'm consuming a service, I want to pay. I don't want to take advantage of other people, because if I'm not paying, someone else is going to have to. And trust me, as a guy that's been on a paving crew, and that's what I'm doing as a job now, because my truck career was destroyed. But I actually am one of those guys that build roads. So I'm all for building of the roads, having hospitals, having doctors. And the issue, though, and this is the part where I have to push back, is it is theft, because no one has ever asked me, right? If I want StreamYards offers me a service, and I have to enter into that contract. I have to pay my $25 US a month, and I get to withdraw at any time. If I find out the StreamYards isn't holding up their side of the bargain, not only can I withdraw my support, but I can actually hold them accountable, because there's an actual drawn up contractual obligation for both sides, both parties in the agreement. That doesn't happen in government. And I get what you're saying, but the problem is, if we continue in this, The boomers might have been more than willing to fall for this shit and keep repeating and regurgitating this stuff. And once again, not all. If you're a boomer and you're not one of those people, don't get mad at me. I'm talking about the ones who are. But as a demographic, obviously a lot of boomers are on board, right? I mean, the boomer, for the entire generation of the boomers, taxes have only ever gotten more and increased. But the problem is, at some point in time, whether it's generational or just on the individual, at some point in time, you just got to stop playing these foolish games, because this is what happens. It started out as what, a few percent tax, right? In 1917 in Canada, it was, we just got to pay for the war, and we had to go and fight against these collectivist, totalitarian, authoritarians. We just got to pay for the war. We had to send a lot of men, a lot of equipment. We just got to take 2 or 3%, out of the corporations and some wealthy Canadians to pay for this. To today, by Canadians accepting that, right? That's that slippery slope. That's that moving the goalpost. Starts out at 2%. It's like, yeah, fuck, I don't mind paying 2%, like you say. And now you acknowledge, Mitchell, look at where we are today. I don't want to continue on that slippery slope. And I want my next generation, I want my kids, and I want them to be smart and wise enough to tell their generation, their grandkids, my grandkids, their kids. I want us to keep passing this knowledge forward, that anything that you enter into that has to do with economics, you have to have a voluntary contractual obligation where all parties are accountable and can be held responsible. The minute there's any pretense where somebody can take any portion of your income, whether it's 1% or 100% without your express implied permission, that is your first step into modern economic slavery and in servitude. That's where it goes. So it's not that I'm against paying for service, it's that I'm against the belief that someone should be able to take money against my will or without my express implied permission.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, and I think the government, they need an intervention. They're addicted to our tax, and they just continue to increase and increase. And I think it does come back down to consent, and it's the same with the lockdowns and restrictions too. Yeah. It comes down to consent. And of course, and I think it's a fallacy to think that us as humanity wouldn't help out our society without being forced into it. And I do think taxation is theft. They're like the mafia shaking down a store for protection, right? It's not really any different. And with the restrictions and with tax, if they have to force us to do it, then they haven't explained their position well enough. And if our healthcare system is so great, and I get challenged on this a lot, why were 350,000 surgeries canceled in the last year and we're doing it again? If our healthcare system is so great, why can't we handle a mild pandemic? So exactly. And we have no choice, right? So they have their illegal monopoly on healthcare. We have no choice, and they took it away from us. Like, people aren't going to their doctors, and it's it's maddening. And it's the same principle, and it comes down to that principle of consent. I donate, I volunteer my time in my community, I opened a co-working space in West Kelowna to help the community. I do that voluntarily, and I think if as humanity we're good people, we will help other people. I don't have direction over my tax money either, right? Like, they take it all. I don't get to say, I want a percentage of it to go to this and that.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the part I think I would, if I had my disposable income that they took from me, I would be using that to help people who I deem worthy, right? Who I deemed that was worthy of my charity. And that's the thing, when government does it, I don't know who the hell that's going to. And a lot of our money, as we're seeing, right? How many people, even just CERB alone, out of the 8.9 million Canadians, how many of our, and it's not just our money, right? Because we realize at this point in time, I think all of us recognize at these kind of debt and deficit levels, at our current taxation, or even if it's a little bit higher, we're not paying off all these debts. That's our kids and our grandkids that we're basically talking about at this point in time. And for anyone to believe that, you should be able to economically slave people who aren't even alive or even have the ability to enter into these. That's the other thing. Like I say, it's not even the pay it off now. It's like, it'd be a different story. Matter of fact, if things weren't so removed from the pretense that government suggests, like once again, I'd be even a minarchist if government did exactly what they expressly or what they suggested, right? I wouldn't be fighting for that last little bit between anarchism. I wouldn't even be questioning these authorities if it wasn't for the fact that I realize that it's all based on not just mysticism, but absolute abstract lies and bullshit. And You're not going to end up in a healthy, free society when everything's built on mysticism and absolute lies. That's the problem, right? And just like if you raised your kids, right? I mean, sure, people can get lucky, but it would literally be pure luck or like a proverbial needle in haystack if you raised a kid, in an environment where you use force, violence, and theft solely as your means to an end, and then they turned out to be well-adjusted people that did neither or of the sorts, right? That's a rare exception. Sorry, go ahead.
Don't forget the fear part too, where if you don't follow what I do, I won't protect you.
Right, exactly.
Can you imagine how damaging that would be to your kids if you're like, hey, if you don't do what I think and what I say, I'm not going to protect you.
It's so devastating. It's so disturbing, and really, it's difficult what they actually do. To us, even when we started as young children in the school, how they condition and program us to think in such insane ways. And I get it. And the part that I think that's most disturbing to me, it's always they use the means to appeal to our emotions. So obviously, in this, the fact that they can appeal to our emotions and our compassion. So when people, I'm not I can't think of the names now, but anyways, I don't believe all humans are bad. I don't believe all humans are good, but I believe humans can be, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and I think it can play into every area of our field. You can be good most of the time, bad all the time, and it depends on a lot of factors. But if you're constantly always advocating for or appealing to the bad side or the terrible way of doing things, they can be effective, right? Obviously, we recognize that using force can be effective. I mean, it's not just the average thief that knows that. Governments, those who represent government, know this intrinsically. But once again, when you are raised or you're developed in a society that's always the means to an end, well, that's why we live in an area where we're not even talking about minarchism anymore. Now it's a matter of statism versus full-on, we don't even want to have any governments because we recognize just how inherently immoral and evil governments can be by sheer fact that they're giving people the pretense to do things that none of us are allowed to do or have any authority to do. And that's why it's so difficult. Like I say, I would love to be a classical liberal or a minarchist and just like I say, let's just shrink our taxes down to the point where we're just paying for whatever services we produce or provide. But once again, it's all built on abstract lies and mysticism. This is never going to happen, right? And the more and more people, this is why I think we really got to have these adult conversations. The more people believe that you can just use government force as your means to an end, and it's going to work out good for all of society. Like if we keep trying these experiments time and time again, well, I mean, the 20th century was devastating, and many centuries prior to that, but the 20th century in particular, because of our modern advancements in technology and weaponry, and 21st century is going to be much worse, right? But to constantly play these foolish games, the Enlightenment era happened for a reason, folks. Things were getting bad. Europe went through a long, protracted dark ages before the Enlightenment era ever come to exist. And I'm telling you, I don't want to go through in this modern era, especially in the information age. I don't think we should have to necessarily go through another protracted dark ages before we get out from underneath this stuff. And the only way, just like it was required with the Gutenberg press and the philosophers and the people who were critical thinkers at the time, was their ability to get their information out there and freely available to the rest of their citizens or the rest of society. That's why this freedom of speech is so fundamentally important, because all we have at the end of the day, right? If we're not willing to use force as a means to an end, and as libertarians, that's not what we're doing, right? Well, we defend ourselves, in defense, the only time we'll use force. But if we want to shift and affect society or culture, the only thing that we have at our disposal that has the possibility to do that is our ability to use the power of persuasion and objective reality and proper morality and ethics. But if we can't even espouse that, if we can't use these amazing tools that are at our disposal in this modern information age, if we're restricted or denied this ability, I believe totalitarian will not only rise, but we will go into some kind of dystopian future, and it will be akin to like a modern form of the Dark Ages. And I'm telling you, folks, once you get to that point, and we're on the precipice, we're getting damn well close. But once you get to the point where you're headed into those kind of dark ages, it requires even much more of a Herculean task than what we're trying to do now. It's not, at that point, it's not just a matter of the power of persuasion or using your words, right? then things get really, really nasty and get really serious. And I don't ever want to get to that point if we can avoid it.
No, I agree. I think we're not that far. You know, people are like, you know, you got these people are saying, oh, they're conspiracy theories. You know, we're pushing towards socialism or almost communism. You know, the writing's on the wall. We're losing a lot of our rights that are given to us as Canadians, and maybe, you know, maybe people don't know what the Charter of Rights and Freedoms is. Maybe as freedom people, could we not educate these people? Like, here's the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Like, it's hanging in. Like, I have one hanging in my room. Like, because it's not political. That's just your basic rights as a Canadian. If we show people this, are they going to listen, or is it going to be like, no, it's just a piece of paper? Because I mean, laws, but we're not following them. You know, do you guys think we can actually reach out to these people that are, well, they're pretty much brainwashed by authoritarian regimes? If we showed them the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, like, here's what you're entitled to as a Canadian. Don't worry about political party. Here's a document that says you're Canadian. Here's the rights and liberties and freedoms you have. Do you think it would work, or is it going to, like, where do you guys stand? Do you think it would work, or is it not going to work at all?
The problem is with that document is there's too many buts. There's too many buts and too many loopholes and too many things. So again, like I think what Bennett said at the beginning is those rights, the government didn't decide them for us. Those are ours, and they wrote that document designed that if they needed to, they're going to still be able to control us. So I think you were offline for a bit when I said that before, but it's an illusion of freedom, and that it's a fundamental issue, and I don't know how we attack that. I mean, I agree there are some very fundamental rights in that document, but there's too many clauses in there that give the government the right to take those freedoms away. So it makes us feel good that we have these freedoms, but we don't really have them, and we never did.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, the pretense or the concept of democracy, even if you go back a couple thousand years, you know, whether you in the times of Aristotle, Socrates, or Plato, any of those guys, you know, and it was the aristocrats. These are people who are properly well informed, but people today, there's no nuance involved anymore in terms of even discussing what democracy represents or what is required, right? I'm not even, listen, as much as I'm not a fan of collectivism or government or majority rule, I'll even suggest, and I would suggest a lot of libertarians or anarchists would say, listen, if we all lived and were raised in an environment or an atmosphere where we all understood these very basic concepts, right? And then we start out, right? Or if this stuff isn't beaten out of your head in some public school or by a lot of statists who enforce these kind of mentalities or these ideologies, is I think most human beings recognize not by selfishness or not by cowardice or not by any other reason other than it's the best strategy for dealing with other people is to treat them with dignity, respect, don't use force. I think these are things that are inherently easy to understand. And the only reason why adults grow to the point where we are today, where you have a plurality or majority of them, is because the institutions that represent democracy, such as the education center, such as the courts, the justice system, you know, like I say, academia, post-secondary. If you had a well adjusted and knowledgeable society that understood these things, you might be able to get away with some form of democracy or minarchism. The problem is these are all pipe dreams, because you'll never live in an era, you'll never live in an environment or an atmosphere where the entirety of your population, right, is going to be fully understanding and knowledgeable as to what it even means to be free. This is the problem with the democracy, and why I don't know what's going to be the next step for human beings, other than obviously getting down to the individual is the most important. But at the same time, I also recognize as a libertarian that for some reasons the messaging falls on ears that aren't, either they're not listening properly or we're not giving the right message. Because it's not a matter, I hear constantly by people who say, oh, you libertarians, well, you just want to be living on an island, isolated all alone, and live all and do whatever the hell you want. What are you, some kind of a heathen? No, that's not what it is. That's not what it is at all. Like I say, but until we live in an era, an environment, like I say, where enough people understand these things, we're always going to be the dog chasing its proverbial tail. Democracy is always going to use the methodology where some people, because we recognize that government is force, government is power. So what people are doing, they recognize it instinctively, inherently, is they're going to use that power as a means to their end. And even if they don't recognize that they're using it as a means to their end, they're going to use it as a means to protect themselves against other people who they perceive are trying to use that same force against them. So that to me is the most important thing when you're talking about government is I love the minarchist idea, but the minarchist idea still keeps the pretense of authority. And then it's still people wrangling and fighting over who gets control over that kind of authority. And that is the part where, and it took me quite a while, and I've thought about it. I've even flip-flopped a little bit in my mind, thinking, yeah, but this anarchism thing, I've been, it sounds pretty, it could be better. But once again, it's the belief in authority. It's really, at the end of the day, and I've said this before, liberty truly is a state of mind. And it's not, when people hear me say this, living on an island, isolated all by myself. But I at least want to live in a society where everyone recognizes that we are sovereign individuals, and you have no pretense of authority to dictate and control any aspect of my social and economic life. The only thing that we do have that we can respect, and it's not just mutually agreeable and beneficial to all parties involved, but it can be universalized, which are the simple rules of the non-aggression principle. Don't use preemptive force, violence, theft towards your fellow man, woman, and child. And once again, that doesn't mean everything's going to be perfected. You're going to need other things. I personally have used Christianity in my background to help me to fill out some of the gaps and voids, but I'm not trying to suggest that religion is the only thing that you can get there. Like I say, between objectivism, Stephen Mullen used UPB, I believe humans will get to the point where we'll have a secular form of ethics without needing any mystical concepts or abstract ideas that are built on like things that you can't prove that are tangible in the real world. I get that. I get how people are having a difficult time trying to navigate through this space. This probably would have been just as difficult during the Enlightenment era for a lot of those great figureheads that were trying to figure these things out as well. But you know what? Even though it's difficult in the short time, I want us all to keep in mind, if we keep fighting, because our opponents are relentless, so we have to be just as relentless and even more so. But if we keep fighting the good fight, I firmly believe that most Canadians, once again, I don't think people are inherently bad or necessarily inherently good, but I think people are properly and naturally incentivized to do what's right for them, and not just for today, but for tomorrow and for next week, next year. And how that does that is by using voluntary means, because that's always worked out. And we all know this in our own personal lives. You know, the best relationships you've ever had in your life are ones where you didn't use force, violence, and theft towards the other person on the other side of that equation. And that's all we have to do at the end of the day, is make sure that we extrapolate that out to the point where it's universal and consistent. And I think when we get that point, it doesn't mean that everything rainbows and unicorns, but if you live in a healthy society of people that understand these principles firmly enough, then you've got the best possible chance at life that anyone could possibly have.
Yeah, and I use that a lot too, because people say, "Oh, you're libertarians. You're selfish. You don't care about other people." Let's be clear. As a human species, we're selfish. We put ourselves at the top, whether you consciously admit it or not. You do, yep. But that doesn't exclude you from being selfless either. For example, the community involvement I do, and volunteering, and trying to save a community center, and all this kind of stuff. These are things that they help my business. They help the community that I'm raising my kids in be better. If my community is better, that's better for me, right? So all of these things kind of work together. But I'll admit, and we all are as humans, we're selfish at a root, and we do things in order to satisfy some sort of a need. Just most people aren't very conscious about it, and they, and again, I go back to when my businesses are doing well and I have money, I'm donating to music programs, I'm helping, I'm giving up my time. And I think as humans, that's what we will do. We just don't need to be coerced into it.
Yeah.
No, I agree. It's going to be an uphill battle for people like us, because we touched on it a year ago now, Bennett, and I was talking about the school system. They're so indoctrinated as soon as they get in the school system that they're not given any other. They're being told what to think, not how to think. They're not given, these ideas that are, freedom, personal responsibility. They're not taught these things. It's do what the government tells you. Here's what you have to think. And one of my favorite quotes is from Friedrich Hayek, and it's, "There's all the difference in the world between treating people equally and attempting to make them equal." There's you can treat people you can treat people equal, but make them equal. Like, you can't force everyone to be equal. People are good at different things. People are going to make more money than other people, and that's the issue I have when I say I'm a libertarian. Everyone's like, so you want the poor people to stay poor? You don't want welfare? You want the white? I've really had people say you want white men to stay wealthy. I'm like, I've never mentioned race. I've never mentioned religion, sexual orientation. It's people. People will succeed based on their values and their drive to succeed. Not everyone's going to be Elon Musk. I've had people say Elon Musk is too wealthy. Well, did you go invent Tesla? Did you invent SpaceX? Did you and the risk of doing these things? And they didn't.
Yeah.
That's
Well, you know what's so crazy?
That's why he's wealthy.
Exactly. You know what's so crazy about the kind of people, especially today, right? Because, and this is so insane with this goddamn divide, this political divide, right? Is Elon Musk is the guy with the most successful, right? Car manufacturer that actually challenges the internal combustion engine, right? Like, I'm a big fan of the internal combustion engine. I've always been into racing, and I'm a big fan of it. Now, I'm a supporter of the energy industry, but the hilarious part of it is the kind of people today, because Elon Musk is more or less a libertarian and a capitalist, even though he's the guy that has created the most beneficial corporation in modern American history for the people that are greenies or the environmentalists, right? These are the kind of people that will be out there like constantly insulting the guy because he just doesn't agree with their politics. Like, this is what I mean. This is the part that drives me nuts about. Listen, if you are an environmentalist, you should be really happy that Elon Musk is showing that a private company, can step outside the bounds of government and find a way like that. Listen, the messaging, the story, the ambition, and the goals, and future entrepreneurs that could use that once again as a springboard for their own success, right? I mean, like I said, the narratives that could be because they saw him on Joe Rogan smoking a fucking reefer. Like, really? That's going to be worse. I mean, the guy, like I say, he's invented not just
space. The guy's going to space. He got over the bureaucracy of NASA. He got past government regulations and was able to send a rocket to the space station.
I was just about to mention that because everyone said, "Oh, we have to have NASA to go to space." Elon Musk was like, "No, wait a second." And I believe was it like 3/10? Is it 3/10 the cost or 4/10 the cost for him to send a rocket for SpaceX? And it is NASA. No, and they're better rockets. Like, the inside is entirely touchscreens. I've watched like the SpaceX launches. Good for him. People are like, he's too greedy. He's doing what he's good at. He's well educated. He hires people. He pays his people really well. So what's the problem? Not everyone can be Elon Musk.
Yeah, and not only that, but especially for Canadians. I mean, in Canada, especially when it comes to the telecommunication industry. I mean, and as an Atlantic Canadian, here in Canada, well, from Ontario East, I'm not as familiar with some of the infrastructure out Western Canada, but in Canada, it's basically Bell or Rogers. That's your two options, and that's it, right? In terms of, and then there's a few others that piggyback off of that infrastructure, but it's still the same, basically, to the duopoly, right? Bell and Rogers, and yet here we're being or Explore, right? I guess, right? But here we have, like, as Canadians, we're going to be offered an option by an American corporation, once again, that's going to disrupt the status quo and completely destroy this monopoly that represents, Rogers and Bell. And who are the kind of people, once again? These leftists who used to be just a few years ago. I remember the leftists. Where the hell did they go? They used to be constantly railing against corporations. Where the fuck did all these leftists go? Because I don't see them anymore. Now, the only corporations they're railing against now are the ones that are there to help them, right? They're railing against Bitcoin. Hey, takes you out of the fiat currency system. They're railing against Tesla. Hey, takes you out of the current, like, if you're not a big fan of internal combustion engine and you're an environmentalist, hey, he's helping you out there. He's got the internet. He's going to offer you a completely different internet service, much higher speeds and all that stuff. And yet, like I say, these leftists, because, he doesn't agree with my politics, they're countering. They're rebelling against the guy that's given them the most disruption to the status quo and the establishment that any human being has done in modern times. And that's the part that's like, it's like around people who are so ideologically driven that even someone that's say, here's the key to your shackles, they're like, go away. Right? What?
Well, point out to them what happened with Rogers last week, and their story is one software update to one critical piece of equipment shut down the entire network for almost 24 hours. That alone should be, we need more competition. And also they should be a little bit, have some more redundancy, because if one piece of equipment can take down the whole network for a day, we're in some pretty serious trouble.
Yeah.
Well, the two things I laugh at is everyone, like, I think Canada has like the second highest cell phone, like our cell phone bills are the second highest in the world. Everyone's like, well, that's what we have to pay. I'm like, well, you could bring in AT&T, you could bring in T-Mobile. I mean, you look at the American cell phone prices, it's like 4 lines, unlimited text, talk, data for like $90 or $80, and then they lower it because everyone's like, well, we're going to beat you, we're going to get more customers. But Canadians are like, no, we have to keep Bell and Rogers. We have to pay our ungodly cell phone rates. And I was late to the cryptocurrency thing. I know you guys just touched on that. I was like, no, I'm not going to invest. I'm not going to look at that. So I don't. And now I didn't know this. Canadian banks now do not let you use their credit cards to buy cryptocurrencies from secure crypto servers. So they're like, it's for your protection. And I'm like, I'm sitting here like, no. It's because you want to keep all the fiat currency to yourself. You don't want to get people to have self-wealth from cryptocurrencies. But, oh, here's my credit card. I can go buy drugs. I can buy anything I want off this thing. But no, you can't. You can't buy cryptocurrency. We're doing it to protect you. I'm thinking, if you use Binance, you have to there's 16 steps you have to go through to even buy the cryptocurrency. Like, it is very secure, but they don't want you to have it. And a lot of countries are already banned. Like India doesn't allow cryptocurrency at all. I don't believe China does. North Korea. There's other countries that they don't even allow it because they don't want their fiat money to lose its value, even though it's not worth anything now. It's paper money. We have no gold standard. The money's not worth anything.
Yeah.
Dogecoin went way up again today. So
nice.
Oh, geez, I have two friends that are big into Dogecoin. I'm gonna laugh. I don't know if he's still watching, but we started getting into crypto together, and he was like, "You got to get Dogecoin." I'm sitting here like, I'm not getting Dogecoin. Like, it's a meme. There's no cap on it. And as a logical thinker, supply and demand, basic economics, if there's too much of it, it's not going to be worth anything. So I went the other way. I mean, I made my money last month, but it wasn't as much as he made. So he still picks on me every now and again about it. But, I think crypto, I don't go as far as saying crypto is the future. I'm still kind of old fashioned. I like my gold and silver, but I think crypto has a great place, and it's going to take some of the monetary power away from the central banks. The central banks. People can actually create their own wealth, but now the government's saying they're going to start regulating it. They're going to tax you on your cryptocurrency. So I mean, they just want more and more. They're taking more and more from you the further you try to get ahead. And it goes back to the capital gains tax, right? If we didn't have capital gains tax, the money you would save in not being taxed by the government, you could invest in your community. You could invest more into your own personal wealth, which extends to your family or friends. You want to loan the money. And then, there's so many things that people don't realize. Well, the capital gains tax creates so much revenue. Well, what's the revenue doing for us? Our healthcare sucks. Our roads, you could sit in some of the potholes here in Atlantic Canada, and they don't fix them. Yeah. So, what do you have some accountability for where our money's going? Which, that goes back to what we said, we were kind of back and forth on the taxes. If we had a flat tax rate and someone said, here's what you pay in taxes, here's where your money goes, or you could deviate where your money goes, I want to put 8% of my tax takes out of me into the roads. Then by all means, let's have that. But don't just we're going to take all your money. You have no idea where it goes.
Yeah. The only problem is, though, I think if you get to that point, Mitchell, I think it has to be called something entirely different, because taxation has an actual description and a connotation, and we all know what it means. So if it actually gets to the point, like you say, where you describe it in that manner, where it's there's actual accountability, you enter in a contractual voluntary manner, then I don't think it can be called taxation at that point in time. And maybe at some point in time, would that be the most amazing thing that could happen in the 21st century? If we could just drop that. Now, we're always going to have that. Well, as humans, there's two things that you can always be sure of: death and taxes, right? If we could get rid of just one of them, Elon's probably going to be working on the other one, death, right? With the artificial intelligence, right? And the neural network. But hey, if we could get rid of one of those things, right? And taxation would definitely be the one I'd want to get rid of first and foremost. first and foremost, even though I'm not a big fan of death either, but you know, at least in that area, right, we're all susceptible to it, right? There's nobody that gets to escape that one. But the taxation thing is definitely something that, like I say, because I do believe that there's a lot of pent up productivity, wealth, and if you just freed that up into areas where people can actually use it properly, I think, like I say, now some people will use it for stupid shit, but I believe a lot of people, if they had a certain point of their disposable income for themselves, that they would be doing it to help, right? I mean, think about, like I say, these cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin, I will say at this point in time, it's definitely here to stay, and I think it's going to continue going forward. And it's going to be one of the main staples in terms of countering fiat currencies. But one thing I do like about the joke one in terms of like Dogecoin and one, and it's kind of been referenced to because it's valuation. And once again, as long as you're not playing in respect to the bubble type games and kind of stuff, is, you know, it's kind of like the poor man's currency at this point in time. Right now, to get into cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin or even Ethereum now, that's at like what, over $3,000. You kind of almost got to have money to make money. Although even if you buy a fraction of Bitcoin, I get all that if you break it down into smaller denominators. But things such as Bitcoin, as much as it might have started out as a joke, listen, it's not a joke, folks. And I get people that don't understand economics. If you don't understand, then you should learn about your history, because anything, when fiat currencies get to the point where they're destroying your purchasing power or your ability to retain any of that or exchange that in a proper valuation or manner, people have in the past have used things such as tulips, right? Tally sticks, just a piece of wood with markings on it, right? So no, human beings and these cryptocurrencies are much better than your tally stick or your tulip. I'll tell you that at the very least. Now and I'm with Mitchell here, I do love me, I got to admit, I love me some tangible gold and silver. It's a great thing, but almost as good, not quite as good, but some of these cryptocurrencies that you can use for, you know, exchanging and valuation, because that's really all money is at the end of the day. If you think about money in its proper intrinsic manner, it's a means to measure your value, it's a means to exchange your value, and a means to retain your value. So if we can use other methods such as these cryptocurrencies, even something like Dogecoin, to do that and escape the fiat paradigm, well then, once again, what is the dollar backed by? Well, the military. But has the military got the force to prevent me from stepping outside that? Are they willing to use that force, right? That's the thing. We could create an entire economic environment that can truly challenge some of the most dominant behemoths. We're talking central banks and fiat currencies that have been issued and in circulation for centuries. I mean, you can challenge all that stuff with, like, once again, some of these cryptocurrencies. And I'm definitely recognizing that the central planners are recognizing that, which is why they're trying to come up with their own digital currencies, right? But just like many times in the past, and you don't even have to be a libertarian, humans are very innovative, very creative, and they will find a way, right? They will find a way. Just like, I don't know if you guys saw that picture I was sharing earlier. That was quite ingenious. Actually, let me see if I can find that. I'll talk about it here while I'm trying to find it. But it was this group. I think they were setting up a church service. Let me see if I can find it here. And they set up a bunch of hay bales in a circle. I don't know if you guys seen that.
No, I didn't see that.
Here. No, I missed that one.
See it. Okay,
so much content out there right now.
I know there's a ton of stuff. But anyways, you guys go ahead, and if you want to just talk, I'll bring this up once I find it here.
Related to that, I really liked seeing in Bowdoin, Alberta, where they had hundreds of people out for a rodeo, and they called it a protest.
Yes, nice. That was
amazing.
It's kind of funny because they just said like a week prior, 2 weeks prior, the CDC said, COVID doesn't spread very well outdoors. So then they have a rally in Alberta, and then all of a sudden the Canadian media is like, they're going to spread COVID. They're not wearing masks. They're anti-vaccine. They're anti-mask. I'm like, the moment you say you don't want to get the vaccine, they're like, oh, you're anti-vaccine. No, I'm pro-choice. Like it shouldn't be forced, right? It should be, do I want it or not? If you want to get it, it makes you happy, it makes you feel comfortable, go get the vaccine. If you don't want it, don't get it.
Exactly. That to me is like, I don't care if you want to get a vaccine, you do your thing, but that's the point. Yeah. Freedom of choice, right? But anyways, I don't know if you see this picture. That's pretty wild, right? And I put a caption in there: where there's a will, there's a way. And you know what? Libertarians are really, really good. If there's one thing libertarians are really amazing and adapted to, is function outside of control when needed and necessary, right? And this here looks like a perfect example of a big group of independent, sovereign, libertarians. Look at that. It's a bunch of hay bales, lined up all in a circle where you can come into it. And there's your church service right there. And if you were someone driving by from the streets, right, you'd never see any of that. It's just a bunch of hay bales, right? But like I say, human ingenuity, man, where there's a will, there's a way. We will find a way. And that's one thing, like I say, libertarians are really good at, right? Is trying to find a will and a way.
I think another thing that it's kind of scary right now, and I've touched on with other people, is big corporations are open. Like you can go into Walmart and Costco and get whatever you want, but you can't go to church, and the small businesses are shut down. So you're telling me if we're going on their narrative that COVID spreads indoors, so does Walmart and Costco have some preventative COVID shield inside the building that you're not gonna get COVID inside Walmart, but you're gonna get COVID inside a small business? Like if they're gonna play that narrative, well then if you want to have social distancing, you want to wear masks, if that's the law they're going to put in place and whatever, but it doesn't make sense. Why are the big corporations not losing any money?
Yeah, but you got to be careful because you point that out to them.
Yeah, but the small businesses are killing. They're dying off right now.
But when you point that out to the governments, then they get silly ideas. Well, we'll just tape off half of Walmart, and you can't buy socks, right? And that's
which they have done in Ontario.
Yeah, it's disgusting, and the logic of it makes absolutely no sense. And outdoor activities, like I went to the Freedom Rally, the first mega rally I went to, and felt completely and perfectly safe. Like crowd modeling, like people don't actually interact with that many people in a crowd, and when you're watching a speaker, you're breathing at the back of someone's head. But I went to Costco after that, and there's a zoo in there. Like, I didn't feel safe, and I'm not afraid of COVID. But
I had someone tell me they went to they were going to go to a freedom rally, and they have pre-existing health issues, so they wanted to wear a mask, and they were so afraid to go to a anti-mask rally that they didn't want to wear a mask. And I'm like, no one is going to say anything. It's about freedom of choice. Freedom. Well, if you want to go to a freedom rally and wear a mask, wear a mask. Yep. We're not going to sit there and mob you to death. Like, I mean, but that's a narrative that everyone else is playing.
But there are people that will do that, and I did address that in my speech that I had there, because one of our candidates did wear a mask, and there was reasons why he was doing it, and he was, people were like, don't you know this, don't you know that, and he's like, yeah, I do, but this is my choice and this is why I'm doing it, and they wouldn't let it go. And I kind of pulled them aside and I said, like, look, like, you forcing your thoughts onto this person is the same as what the government is doing to you. And
absolutely,
and those more fringe than us types of conversations, that's what the media latches onto. And I said to him, what's happening here is important, but as soon as you do that, and as soon as you start yelling at the media because they're there, then that's how you're going to be perceived. And I'm not saying be disingenuous, but it did click to him. He's like, oh, you know what, that I get it, that's his choice to wear the mask, and that's what's important.
Yeah, that is really important. As libertarians, that is so important. And leading by example is the most fundamental aspect of libertarianism, is doing the right thing. Like you say, if someone chooses to want to wear a mask, listen, and to insult and deride someone that you don't know their personal circumstance or situation, that's a terrible. But you don't know, like I say, that could be someone that has some really serious health issues. And because they've been, look at the way the media has been portraying COVID-19, right? Can you really blame some people for being scared, having this daylight scared completely out of them? The way the media portrays it, I remember, now I haven't heard so much in Canada, but I remember reading something in the US where they were suggesting that upwards of, what was it? I forget what the percentage exactly was. It more than a third, I believe. It might have been even upwards, not half, but maybe a third of Americans believe that, people that contact COVID-19, like 10 to 25% of the population are dying or something. Like the numbers are so completely out of range to the reality. But what it is that fear narrative that's being pumped up and churned out by many of these acts the establishment who keep bringing on these experts from the medical field. That's another thing. Where are they finding all these goddamn authoritarian medical experts? Well, I know they exist. I definitely know they exist, because that's actually I remember back in the day, I shared this article and I did a whole video about it, where the top 10 occupations that can be quite authoritarian, and I think doctors and stuff, or might have been in there because they're in really high positions of authority. So that power can probably go to your head, right? But this is the part that I find was most disturbing, that you have like expert after expert being brought out and touted as experts, and constantly regurgitating, repeating these political talking points that you're scaring the shit of the public. And once again, and there's one thing that I want to point out about this is, I am no longer confused. My wife's no longer confused, and anyone that's actually listened to me on a regular basis, we are no longer. I used to be confused early on, about 10 years ago, when I first started learning about liberty and libertarianism and all this stuff, and especially when you think about the 20th century and Nazism and communism. How the fuck do you get that many people to support this fucking little mustache? I don't question that anymore. I totally get it now. So the only thing, that's the one thing about the authoritarianism that's rised in now this modern 21st century. It's now that I realize, it has taken the question out of my mind entirely, and I realize it's just people are very highly vulnerable and susceptible for propaganda, especially and in particularly when it's horizontally enforced. So just like Larkin Rose, I like to bring him up from time to time. I remember a video I watched of him. It's not the little guy. It's not the Hitlers, the Maos, and the Stalins, right? It's not the little asshole with the mustachio that you got to be fearful of. No, it's the mindless minions who believe that he is their authority, right? And that's the part that's most disturbing, and that's the part that I'm recognizing today. Trudeau with his fucking fancy pants and socks, I'm not worried about that fucking guy. Have you seen the guy with his shirt off? He looks like an adolescent child, right? Sorry, nothing against men that aren't physically, right? Not trying to be, but I'm just saying he's not, but he's not your typical big, strong man kind of guy, right? But he's in that position of authority, and I've seen, oh shit, that's all you need. And look at how people will just fall for that hook, line, and sinker, because he's given them the same kind of rhetoric, the same talking points, and the whole "we're all in this together." Like this, sacrificing individuals for the collective. It's all the same shit. So I totally get it. I totally get it now. I see it. My eyes are wide open.
Well, and bringing that back to Bill C-10, this is where it makes even a bigger difference, because if we ever get into a situation like this, if we get out of this situation, we get into another situation, and we don't have that ability to have dissent. So, with Bill C-10, imagine so in BC right now that they've implemented, they can do roadblocks and roadside checks for leaving your health region, and it's actually unenforceable. And they actually said that in the media, right? But imagine if I went on YouTube and I said, okay, well, here's your charter rights. Here's what it actually said, is they can't actually ask you where you're going or what you're doing. And all you have to do is say, I'm going for an essential reason. Make something up if you want. And they can't stop you. Like, there's nothing that it's not like they can follow you and see what you're doing, and they're going to do that. So it's a fear and coercion technique. But if we don't have that ability to have that dissenting voice, then they're just able to get away with whatever they want. And that's where, and people are like, well, it's Canada, they're not going to do evil things. Well, they already are with quarantine hotels and these sorts of things. I remember one person said, oh, well, that's old news. They're not doing quarantine hotels anymore. I'm like, no, they are. It's just CBC's not reporting on it.
The media stopped talking about it. There's one here there's one in Halifax. The whole fourth floor of a hotel is a quarantine hotel, or the floor is off for quarantine.
Yeah, and so if they control the message, they can, and you can be the most genuine person in the world, and you're like, I am doing this for the greater good. Like, we've heard that before. I'm doing this for, I know in my heart that this is, but nobody is 100% right about anything. And that's why you need to have that freedom of speech, and to not censor people, because people could watch me, and lots of people do think I'm an idiot, and that's fine. Go ahead, call me an idiot. My feelings aren't going to get hurt, but that's my right to be able to get on there and say what I believe, even if it's wrong. I'm personally, if I'm factually wrong, I'll admit it, and I'll backpedal. But whatever, like, who gets to decide this? It's scary.
If I was wrong, I would, instead of, if I was wrong, or sorry, when I'm wrong, so I've been wrong before, but I would rather have someone correct me instead of just silencing me. Like, you're not learning anything. No one's growing that way. It's okay, you're wrong, be quiet, go away, we're going to silence you now. Because then you don't get better, you don't evolve, you don't learn from anything. So it's getting worse and worse. And I've kind of started talking to people on the other side of, the authoritarian side, and I've even had talks, like I've had honest, open conversations with communists, like in a Discord, and they're not calling me names. We're having an open discussion. I'm actually going to be on a podcast at some point. They're in Connecticut, and they're left libertarians, I guess. So they want freedom, but they also, I don't know where they actually fall.
So they're still learning what libertarianism is.
So we're gonna have that. No, not quite. We want the government to do this. We want the government to. Well, then you're not a libertarian. You're a leftist, or you're an authoritarian. If you want the government to, pat you on the head and say good job, or you run this in trouble, and the government's going to look out for you. That's not what a libertarian is. But Bennett, when you mentioned about Trudeau and the socks and that kind of funny. What I find now is before he would pander with his words, and now he's pandering with his appearance. He has a scruffy beard. He's not clean shaven anymore. He hasn't had a haircut in God knows how long. Are you telling me you make $337,000 a year and you can't find someone to come cut your hair? No, he's doing that to make it seem like he's in dire straits too. You're sitting in your cottage or wherever you go, and you're living life, man. Like, you're not in any dire strait.
Yeah. Well, listen, let me know, Mitchell, when you do have that conversation, and share it with me on the social media, or send me a message when you do have that conversation. That should be interesting. But back to what Keith was saying earlier, I think that's actually something that we haven't talked about yet, and it's really important. It's not just, as a libertarian, I hold myself to a really ridiculous high standard, I think, as we all do, in terms of what I produce or provide or put out there on social media, and even in my personal life. But at the same time, even if I wanted to absolutely fucking lie or misrepresent, like, that's the point of freedom of speech. Like, like, who are these arbiters of truth? Even if, like I say, even if I personally recognize, okay, I check all the boxes, I tell the truth, and I'm very uncomfortable with the fact, not just uncomfortable, downright disgusted with the fact that anyone believes that you should have the ability to silence someone, even if they say something that's incorrect. Now, once again, I am the kind of person, I like to be correct. And if I'm wrong, yes, correct me, please, because I hate going around being an idiot saying things that are stupid, right? I really, it bothers me, right? It's just like, and it goes back to my days, and I still do, of performance engine building stuff. If I'm doing something wrong and my opponents are constantly kicking my ass, I want to learn. Right? That's really beneficial for me, even though it's humbling at that moment. But at the time, but it also benefits me greatly by learning and improving myself. But at the same time, in the realm of freedom of speech, and what we understand what freedom of speech entails is not just for telling the truth, or what's politically correct, or what's right, or what's completely truthful and honest. Even if you want to say something that's completely fucking full of shit, you should have the right to do that. There should be
people won't listen to you. If you're completely full of shit, people aren't going to listen to you anyway.
Exactly. It's like the guy downtown when I lived in Toronto. We used to, when we'd go downtown on the weekends, just for a joke, to maybe go to the head shops or cruise the strip, there'd be some crazy nut bar out there, right, saying some crazy things about aliens are coming, or like whatever. We all know it's not true, but fucking nobody takes the guy seriously. Nobody was there. No. There was no cops that I remember saying, hey, we got to shut this guy up for suggesting that aliens are real, right? Or
he's not hurting anyone.
He's not hurting anyone, right? If you're
just sitting there talking,
right? Yeah, if you're foolish enough to fall for the guy, well, that's on you. But you should not have the ability to silence or suppress people. Now, like I say, only areas where I've ever said where I might agree were words, like if you're genuinely, advocating for full-on violence in the main, that's where it's, and I think this is where American jurisprudence and law has really covered it properly, and hopefully that doesn't change. Well, hopefully with the judges that are on the bench now, it won't, is where, like where you are genuinely, where there's a direct imminent threat, and you are actually, and you can prove that in a court of law. Right, in those areas, I can see where, but again, it's still, that's only, to me, I still believe that that's only going to be evidence to lend credibility to the case. It'll be the actual act of harm, I think, that'll actually be the part that should be properly criminalized. But I recognize that people will say terrible things and advocate for violence I even get them from time to time on my own pages, like where they say, "Oh, we got to go hang Trudeau and stuff." It's like, I get that, but like, when you're bringing that stuff, and advocating for it, as much as I'm not saying you're wrong per se, but it's not the kind of discourse that's going to be proper in terms of how I want things. But I would never suggest that anyone should be refused their ability to speak freely, other than, like I say, if you're genuinely advocating for using violence against someone and you actually directly mean it and it actually turns into violence. But once again, I don't believe that the speech itself would be a punishable offense. I think it'd be the actual crime. So once again, as a libertarian, I don't advocate for violence. I don't support people who advocate for violence, but a lot of people say a lot of stupid things. I mean, just think of all of this. I mean, I know growing up as a kid, people used to say, "I'd kill that motherfucker." I mean, the amount of times I've heard people say like words that sound really derogatory, terrible, and really nasty, but none of it ever meant anything. It was just people using words like out of maybe they're angry in the moment or something. But now today you're to the point where you say one thing wrong, right? Or one sentence or one paragraph wrong on social media, and you're basically not just canceled in terms of one platform, but the entire world. And then that's not just the online world, but that can even affect your physical space, because then the rumors, the innuendos, right, the rhetoric, that gets spread around. And then you have cancel culture that happens even in the physical world as well. So once again, I think personal responsibility is important. So if people are advocating for things that are terrible, let's use our voices. And that's the beauty of freedom of speech. If someone's advocating for violence, let's use our voice to push back against it. And also, if they're advocating for violence, say, well, yeah, I'm willing to defend myself. Right? I'm not advocating for violence, but I'm also willing to defend myself. So violence is going to, you might want to bring that to me, but I have the ability to defend myself as well. So once again, it's always comes down to the act. It's not the speech. Why speech has to be restricted? The only reason, like I say, I've run through this scenario through my head multiple times. And the only people that could possibly support restricting speech are people that literally want to do harm to you, and they don't want you to have the ability to speak up or openly against them. That's a nasty incentive and something I'd never want to see take place, not in this country.
I had a really interesting perspective during the provincial election that I've never really consciously thought of before. We had a Confederate flag incident in Summerland. I won't go into details, but somebody he was saying, he's like, well, I don't want that suppressed, because one, I want to know who the racists are, and I want to be able to. We don't want them in hiding. And then there's also the perspective of the education component. Like I grew up in a small redneck Alberta town, and I grew up a little bit racist, a little bit homophobic, and then I grew up and I learned. And now Facebook, I don't see some of the stuff. Like I have some friends on there from small towns, and sometimes they're posting stuff that it's unpleasant. But I'm like, hey cousin, like, can we talk about this, because I think you've got a lot of hatred in you, and you're not really looking at this in good perspective. But if I don't see that, and we don't see what's going on, and we don't have the opportunity to educate, and especially on social media now, which is the only way we can communicate because we're not allowed to socialize, we've lost the ability to communicate as human beings anymore. We can't have discourse. We can't have conflict, healthy conflict. It's like, no, you are an evil human being because you even you posted something saying that there was no flu this year from the Government of Canada website. And that's
people. Well, hey Keith, even those people that you were suggesting, right? I'm pretty sure the way that you convince them, I've had them in my life too, because I grew up in rural New Brunswick, and I know all about the knuckle draggers. And I always found it so shocking, because I grew up in really, really small town New Brunswick, and then my parents moved me to huge Toronto, well, there's east side of Toronto, Scarborough. So from one like really, really, really low population fucking rural area to highly dense population big city. And like I say, the part that I always found the most crazy about in living in New Brunswick in particular is most of these people have never even dealt with people from different races or backgrounds, but they haven't. But what it is it's ignorance, right? And I tell you, the best thing that can counter people who are ignorant, and now you would suggest that they're racist, and I would even suggest that there are racist undertones to what they suggest, but I think what it is at the end of the day is ignorance. It's not necessarily that these people are racist, because they talk some talk, I've never heard anyone want to advocate or suggest that they were literally going to go out to cause violence to anyone just based on some superficiality, based on this color of their skin, right? So to me, the best thing to counteract that is that freedom of speech. It is people like you or I being able to speak freely to that other person and point out them. And I've actually helped a lot of people, especially in these rural communities, come to realize that no, it's not about skin color at all. Matter of fact, I won't specify the place I worked, but one particular place, most of them didn't want to go into the First Nations community because they had preconceived notions and idea that, oh, these are bad people, right? I was like, because I grew up in Toronto, my parents moved me there when I was 12, threw me basically to the wolves of every demographic you could think of, and I got along with everybody. So from that point forward, because I'm the kind of person I expect, I treat people the way I want to be treated, the live, let live, and the golden rule kind of thing, is I extrapolate that. I did that even back in my hometown. And a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot, but at least a few people that used to have preconceived notions, not specific towards Black people, but for Indigenous people, like Aboriginal people, have come around as a consequence because, I'll take that load. I'd come back and say, oh yeah, those guys were awesome. They offered me a couple beers, couldn't drink it, of course, because I'm on the job and all that stuff. But yeah, they were great. They treated me. And then once they heard that anecdotal evidence or that story, it alleviated their concerns because it was a real world example of someone that they actually trusted, that they knew, and they knew I wouldn't, misrepresent or lie to them. And that alleviated their concerns, their preconceived notions, and that ignorance, right? Once you remove that ignorance from the person's mind, now they have the potential to give these people a chance. And that's the best way. And that only happened by my ability to speak freely with them, right? If my ability to speak freely with them was suppressed in some way, then they'd be able to go on forever, constantly reinforcing that bullshit dogma and that ignorance in their mind because they haven't been privy to any external influence or knowledge that counters it.
Mm-hmm. I'm actually on
sad thing is a lot of people will
right now.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I'm on reserve right now. I'm actually full of I have a co-working space and very libertarian. There's actually a really great Indigenous entrepreneur here who is very much libertarian, and they don't have to pay income tax if their office is here in this co-working space. So I'm helping people not have to get their tax stolen by the government. So it's awesome.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I don't hate on the First Nations people for not having to pay tax. I want to join them.
Yeah, me too.
Sorry, go ahead, Mitchell.
I think the sad thing, as you touched on, is I don't think people are inherently evil, like as a general thing. But if you sit in your own echo chamber, you're not gonna get other ideas, right? And and it goes back to this bill. Is what do you want to like? If they're going to put this bill in place, and God forbid it gets passed, but if you have I'll give you an example of an idea I have. I've said before, and this stirs a lot of this ruffle. There shouldn't be a Black History Month. There shouldn't be an Asian. We don't need. Are we people? Are we Canadians? Are we law-abiding citizens? That's all that matters. There shouldn't be this narrative, and it creates problems, right? And the government has purposely been trying to divide us for years. Before it was in the States in the 60s, it was blacks versus whites, and now they've ran that dry because everyone for the most part gets along now. There's no segregation anymore. Everyone for the most part gets along. So now we got to go against the rich and the poor. We got to create a hatred. We have to create a divide. People need to realize that these authoritarian political parties in the government and these lobbyists, that's what they're trying to do. People don't purposely you're not born saying I don't like Black people, I don't like Indians, I don't like Middle Eastern people. It's part of it. You're susceptible to it by who you hang out with. And I will be the first one to admit, about 10 years ago, I would probably classify myself as social conservative. I didn't want gay marriage. I didn't think they should be married at all. They shouldn't be able to adopt kids. And I sat back after a while, and I had some friends tell me, are you serious? And I'm like, yes. Coming from a semi-religious background, I said, no, they shouldn't be married. Marriage is man and a woman, and that's it. And then the more I thought about it, and the more people I talked to, and the more stuff I did, and I talked to people that were homosexuals, and I understood it's you know what? If you want to go get married, and you want to adopt kids, you want to live your life, be happy, go do it. And I'm glad I got out of my own echo chamber of social conservatives that are just banging the drum. I shouldn't say all social conservatives, but the ones that are extreme, that they want to keep so much religion in politics or religion in culture. We don't need it. If you want to practice a religion, go practice a religion, and it shouldn't be censored. Like, the issue I have right now with religion is and I've heard people say the Christian churches are closed, but the Muslim churches or the mosques or temples are open. So why do they, is that, I don't know if that's true. I've heard it from a lot of people. They're still able to go. Why are Christians not able to go? And then it creates that divide again, right? It's Christians against Muslims. We need to get past these labels. And are you good people? Do you have the values? And I don't care what religion you are, but don't push your religion on me. If you want to be a Muslim, or you want to be a Sikh, or a Hindu, all the power to you. Go do it. They've tried to divide us for too long, and that's where people, I've tried to tell people, and I've tried to go outside and talk to, socialists, communists, people that are authoritarian. I'm like, do you really want that? Do you really want to have that much control to limit what people say? You're not going to learn anything. You're sitting back in that echo chamber, and this is how it's going to be. This is how life's going to be. It's not fair to those people that don't want to live that way. We need freedom. We need freedom of speech. And I don't own a gun. I don't plan on owning a gun. But if someone's a law-abiding citizen, all they do is hunt deer all year, what are you taking their guns away from them for? They're not doing anything. If you take guns away, crime doesn't go away. If that was the case, Mexico would be the safest country in the world, and they have the second highest gun crime. They have the second highest violence rate I believe in the world, and they ban guns. But there's still mass shootings in Mexico. Humans, whether they're inherently the ones that are bad people, they'll find ways to get weapons or find another weapon. I mean, they banned guns in the United Kingdom. Well, we got to protect people. Well, now UK has the highest stabbing and lead pipe beatings in Western civilization. So, the more you limit, whether it's guns, freedom of speech, people will find ways to innovate and still break the law.
There's just one sec there. One thing that always drives me nuts is identity politics. It reinforces division and the victim culture that always drives me nuts. This is the part that's if you want to help people, especially if they're in minority groups or historically oppressed groups, is to stop playing the identity politics and the victim card, because you'll never help anybody. I can't help but thinking, my history, my heritage is Scottish on one side of my family and Irish on the other. Now, if I want to raise my kids based on the stories, and they're very real, right, of the Irish being oppressed by the British for generations, for millennia, right? But what would I end up with as a son if I taught him this kind of identity politics and to constantly raise him to believe that he's a victim, and he's always going to remain a victim based on nothing more than his immutable characteristics? That to me is the most terrible thing. Now I get people individually or in their own groups, they want to do or raise awareness in some way, but when you put that on the political spectrum and create that as a government messaging, that is the press, or that is where division starts right there. Because we all, as human beings, we've all suffered in some way and have been impressed by someone somehow at some point in time. The point, though, is to recognize and realize that the best way to get over that, or to overcome that obstacle or hurdle, is to raise and elevate yourself to the point where you no longer perceive yourself a victim, or even will allow yourself to be a victim. I know myself, there's nobody that's going to create a victim of me, and they definitely aren't going to do it for anyone that I've ever had any influence over. And that's really important. That's almost like an amazing shield against oppression, is having self-respect and dignity, right? And that's the thing that I recognize with people who promote identity politics and that victim culture or that victim mentality, is you just give people an excuse to put their nose down or their head down and accept defeat. And that's a terrible message to send. And it literally suggests that your lot in life is what it is, and you're never going to do any better, and there's nothing that you can do to improve it. Like I said, I could not understand why anyone would want to live in that environment, and I've always fought against it. And I think anyone who represents or is part and parcel of any minority group should stand and rail in opposition to this stuff. There are some people who definitely do that, but not enough as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Anyways, guys, what do you think? I just want to run through the chat here real quick because we are up on the 2-hour mark. I've really enjoyed this chat too, by the way, guys. I really have. I just wanted, maybe, do you guys mind if I just run through and maybe check see if there's a few questions in the chat or?
Yeah, sure.
Go
Okay,
ahead,
cool. Yeah. Well, what's this one here? There we go. Anthony Armada. I don't care what anyone says. I truly believe in dignity. Well, dignity is definitely important. As I said, let people have their freedoms. What's this say? Trish, let people have their freedoms of everything. Once you do something bad, well, your freedoms are taken away, just like prisoners. Yes. Well, I mean, people should have their freedoms, but of course, with freedoms, Trish, and Trish knows this as well, comes that personal responsibility, because that's the flip side. That's the other side of the coin when you're talking about libertarianism. And that's one thing I will say, I guess, back full circle, even you folks that are, supporters of the PPC recognize that, because that was part and parcel of the position, or the four tenets of the PPC was personal responsibility, is freedoms and liberties. Once again, they that can only happen, they can only be respected, they can only exist, right, by first of all understanding what they mean, but it requires personal responsibility on the other side. If you're not personally responsible for your actions or your deeds, then once again, you're going to be looking to offload that to someone else, right? And that's the part where you end up with government. The personal responsibilities thing is most important for us. If we want freedom, if we want liberty, then we all have to hold ourselves to at least some standard of interaction and engagement with our fellow citizens, where you're talking in the economic realm or the social realm. And we have to do that if we want to keep our freedom of speech and our freedom of not just speech, but mobility, and all of our freedom. We have to stand up and be personally responsible. The people who today have shown for generations now, it's been generations who have been saying, let me offload that responsibility to someone else in a pinstripe suit and a tie, right? And it goes to the halls of government. And the more and more you offload those responsibilities to someone else, well, that's where you're destroying and degrading what it is. That's what makes a human being whole. It's not just that I have freedoms, but I have that role and responsibility of being responsible for adhering to those freedoms and respecting other people's freedoms. That's the problem, and that's an area that I think I see with a lot of people on the left today. They're fighting desperately for their rights, but they want to destroy the rights or the freedoms of their opponents, right? That's not how it works. Your rights and your freedoms completely rely on your ability and your willingness to do the same for the people that, not just your neighbor, not just your friend, but even someone you loathe, even someone who you completely and vehemently disagree with. That's how freedom works.
Yeah, and what she said there about how, you lose your freedom if you've done something bad, and that's where you got to be a bit careful, because who decides what's bad and who decides what freedom you get? And that's where we're in the mess that we're in now, where we have the government has so many fear and coercion techniques to get you to comply. Don't pay your COVID fines and we're going to throw you in jail. Or you're not going to be able to renew your driver's license and we're going to restrict your freedoms. And so that's where you got to be very careful with that. You've done something bad. Like, obviously, if you're explicitly harming another human being, then that's got to be dealt with. But it's got to be careful.
It's like these vaccine. It's like these. We didn't touch on it at all, but these vaccine passports or vaccine certifications. I mean, if again, it goes back to, it's less freedom, right? If you don't want to get a vaccine and you're not sick, and you're not sick, but you can't go into that restaurant because you refuse to get a needle in your arm. Once again, and everyone's like, well, it's for safety. It's not the fact it's whether it's safe or not. It goes back to the principle. You're eroding your own freedom. These people are like, we got to get vaccines. It should be I've had people say, I've had people tell me privately, people I've known for years, if you don't get a vaccine, you're an anti-vaxxer, you're anti-mask. If you don't get a vaccine, you're a murderer. And I'm like, what? Like, you've known me for years, and you're saying, we have to get a vaccine. And I'm like, if the government starts limiting, again, back to this, you can't go here because you don't have a vaccine. You can't go here because you don't have. What are they going to do next? You can't go to this next town because you have a certain philosophical belief. I had someone today on Twitter, the Mises Caucus of the Libertarian Party in the States, retweeted one of my tweets. I had someone message me saying capitalism is racist. I'm like, so economics are racist? Like, you show me something in any free market principle that says because you're black, Indian, or a woman, you can't succeed. And they're like, I'm blocking you now. And I'm like, you're a racist. I'm like, so you have nothing to rebuttal. It's just, you can't have anything to say, so I'm racist, you got to block me and silence me. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. Goodbye. I'm like, this is the problem we're in. And I'm trying to get forward to these people and tell them, like, let's just have an open dialogue. But they don't want to have it. They've been brainwashed since they were 7 years old that capitalism is evil and everyone should have equal wealth. Well, I'll tell you, if you look at socialist countries, if we're trying to reduce poverty, you show me a socialist country that the poverty level dropped, because every single country that converts to socialism or communism, everyone comes closer together in wage because there's more poverty. Everyone's poor. 38% of the population is poor. There's no middle class anymore. It's you're poor or you're wealthy, and the wealthy people control the poor people like slaves.
Yeah. So Stuart Passmore, who just asked the question, should drugs be legalized? A little off topic, but did any one of you gentlemen want to take that? How about you, Keith? You want to go with that one?
Yes, I think they should. Like, nobody should get to decide what I put into my body or not. And I think the drugs and a lot of the overdose problems that are happening now is because there is so much stigma and so much shame around it. You know, like BC, we have a huge overdose crisis going on here, and they report every overdose death the same, whether it's a street drug addict that overdoses, whether it's a recreational drug user on the weekend that got a bad batch, or someone that got addicted to opioids because his doctor overprescribed him something. Those all get lumped into the same thing, and I think people aren't understanding the complexities of it. And with anything, if you make something illegal, it makes people want it more, and it makes it hide, and it makes more criminal. And I think it's a fallacy that if you make something legal, like, I'm not going to go start shooting heroin just because it's allowed. I'm not a pot smoker. I'm not against it. That's just doesn't do it for me. I didn't just start smoking pot because it's legal now.
I think a good real life example of that is if you look at prohibition in the States. They banned alcohol in the States. Well, since prohibition doesn't exist anymore, have you seen anyone beating each other up over a beer in a back alleyway? They go buy each other a beer and have a good time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyways, folks, I see most of them are just comments, not so much questions. And I know we've already gone 2 hours and 15 minutes. So I think we're probably, I don't know, did you guys want to continue on, or if you guys still have something to say, I'm always willing to give I always give anyone as much time as needed or necessary if you have something on your mind. But if you think that we've pretty much beat this horse to death, no, but I definitely know there's lots still to cover, but I think we've kind of pretty much covered, well, a fair amount of it. And I realize that people are like I say, 2 hours usually is a limit for a lot of people in terms of watching a live stream. I wish I had actually someone, if I had a better internet connection, if I ever get the thing I've been wanting to do is I've been doing a lot more streams than I have been doing videos in recent months, because there's so much to cover. And I like to be able to get lots of new ones to what I got to say. But I would love to be able to download them, and upload them in short segments. But because my internet connection is so terrible, it takes me, well, even just to upload like a video, I do them in higher quality. So it takes, but 1 gigabyte takes about 3.5 to 4 hours. Right?
Wow.
So yeah, so and when I'm doing that, it basically, because of exploring that, when you're using, they'll allow you to use a certain amount of your broadband for that particular thing, and I've had to call them because I told them, like, it's what I do. Is I even do this, I earn money from it stuff. So but when you're doing that, then the wife can't watch Netflix or so. So basically, I don't have the ability at this point in time, until I get a much better internet connection, to first of all do much better live streaming where it's not breaking down, and to be able to re-upload to. That's another thing too, folks. If you're not familiar, I'm on Rumble now. BitChute was kind of my go-to in terms of uploading YouTube videos, my videos and my live streams. But I don't know what it is, if it's just me, but I have a terrible tie with BitChute. Either not even just from my own videos, but even trying to watch other people's videos. I don't know what it is, but it's definitely not as seamless or smooth, and it buffers way worse. It stops. It won't play. And mine, I know for my videos, I would sit like I say, 4 or 5 hours sometimes and it'll get to the point where it's supposed to do the processing part, and it stays there forever and never gets to where it's actually viewable, like to anyone on the other side of it. It's like, so I just wasted a whole evening, right, for basically nothing. So what I've been doing now has been looking for alternative platforms, and so far out of all of them, Rumble seems to be good. And I'll let you know as well, if you're not familiar with Rumble, it's quite easy. It's very it's a real easy navigable kind of YouTube-ish site, and they're also coming out with different levels in terms of membership, so that you'll be able to you can do your typical videos and you can save them. I think like at $10 you can get 100 or 250 megabytes per month or something in terms of what you can store. But right now they don't apparently have enough people to make it more readily available and at a price point that's more conducive for everyone. But right now they're even offering live streaming. Now at the lowest threshold level on Rumble now, you have to be at the team level, so $100 a month, and they'll give you a terabyte and unlimited live streaming. But they're saying once they get enough people on board on the platform and contributing to it, right, that they're going to be able to reduce the price points and bring it down so that you'll have it easier for independent content creators such as you or I, which is going to be great because, like I say, the videos play great. It's a really good, easy, navigatable site, and it's all about freedom of speech. So unlike YouTube, where we don't know, like even right now, I try my best, and because I'm a monetized channel, I'm have to answer a million questions every time I do everything. And I'm doing pretty good because YouTube, even right now, is relying on they're giving me what do you call it? It's relying on what I input, because I restrict myself when I'm reading through the terms of service, or not the terms of service, but all those disclaimers that you have to. Does it involve hateful content? Does it involve controversy? I answer those questions so goddamn ridiculously honest. I'll even impose restrictions on my own videos where it's like, you're in limited ads, but it's so that I don't get, demonetized or have my channel even further suppressed. But like I say, I'm getting tired of functioning like a fucking pretzel, putting myself into pretzel type positions to try to do this. I don't think what I've ever said, even on videos that might have been considered controversial, I don't think I've ever said anything that should be deemed worthy of demonetizing or my ability not to be on their platform. But we know the writing's on the wall. We know it's going to happen. And with the Bill S10 or C-10 coming to exist or come to fruition, they're going to go hardcore. And where they're going to be going is obviously targeting YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, the dominant players and platforms on social media these days. So if you're not, already on an alternative platform in terms of following, whether it's your favorite YouTube personalities, or just even anyone, friends or anyone else on Facebook or Twitter, you need to find ways to get over into some of these alternative platforms, because this is where we might all end up having to be. And I'm hoping that never comes to exist. But that is the one thing, just like I was showing that picture earlier, where there's a will, there's a way, with the people holding their outdoor church service in a big old field with it. Well, we libertarians, we will find our way to get our voices out there. But it definitely requires, once again, we'll do what we can do on our side, but once again, it requires the personal responsibility for you folks who are the consumers of our content on the other side to make sure you're following us on some of these alternative platforms, because at some point in time, our voices might truly be completely silenced and suppressed on these pages or these channels such as YouTube. And if we're going to function and navigate in this crazy, mad world that we're living today, we need to be able to follow each other and know how we can find ways to get together and counteract these authoritarians. So find me, look for Keith. I don't know, Keith, you got any presence on some of these other social media platforms?
I haven't did some of those ones yet. I have been playing around with liberty.com, LIBRTI.com.
Okay.
So that's the liberty focused Facebook style platform. You have to agree to not want to harm people and to have discourse, not try to change someone's opinion, which I like. They've done a nice job on it, but it definitely needs more content and more liberty-minded people on there just to build it up. But they do have some video capability. But yeah, just kind of started exploring that one.
Right on. What about you, Mitchell? And by the way, I'll make sure to place any links if you guys send it to me whether it's in the email reply or as the message on Facebook. I'll place all these links in the description of the stream as well. But what about you, Mitchell? Do you got any presence on some of these alternative platforms that people can follow you on?
Well, obviously there's the obviously Facebook, Twitter. I'm on Parler, and I also have a Discord server that I run myself. I moderate it myself. There's people in there that are left wingers. They're socialists. We have open conversations. There's voice channels. There's text channels. There's multiple channels you can communicate in. But in closing, I'd like to say this is the third time I've been on your channel, Bennett, and thank you for having me back on. Keith, I wish you all the best in your leadership of the Libertarian Party of British Columbia. I know two of the candidates that ran for you, or sorry, ran for the Libertarian Party last provincial election. And there's no Libertarian Party here in Nova Scotia, so I have no one to vote for provincially.
Or you could start one, Mitchell.
Hey, if there was a 48-hour day, I'd consider it, man. Working full time and overseeing all of Nova Scotia and PEI for the People's Party, my time is stretched very thin. I
hear you, buddy. I should take my own advice as well, because there's not one in New Brunswick either. So.
I appreciate this, and I've been following your videos for a while, and as I said, like kind of new to the sort of official term, and I've learned a ton. Yeah, like what this party did in the last election, like it was a snap election, and we had the fourth most candidates of any party in the province, and we just as a group came together really, really strongly. We're well organized. I'm not putting my name into something for ego. I used to live in ego. I don't anymore. I'm doing it because we have a chance to make a difference, especially here in the Okanagan. We've got a really, really strong freedom movement going that's consistent. And I think, media-wise, we could get a bigger voice in the interior of BC rather than in the communist lower mainland, where it's a cesspool of socialism down there. I don't understand that place.
Yeah, I hear you. I actually definitely agree, and I've heard from quite a few people. It's funny because I'm all the way on the East Coast, but I have quite a few friends out there on the West Coast, and some people actually were from the East Coast who have moved from the West Coast, and they're saying the same thing as you. There's definitely some areas or some hot spots in terms of people who definitely advocate for and stand up for liberty on the West Coast, and that's a great thing to hear. So I'm really proud to know people, like I say, from coast to coast to coast in this country. We're definitely, like I say, we're in a minority, folks, but we punch way above our weight, and we're trying our best to try to educate, enlighten, and inform our fellow Canadians. At some point in time, we may very well get that point. It's a long road, and it's a lot of effort that we got to put into. But you're talking about people who don't mind, putting in a lot of hard work and effort. That's kind of what we do as libertarians. We're not shy. We don't shriek away from controversy or putting a little hard day's work in, right? It kind of gives us ourselves, I know I'll speak for myself, it gives me a sense of fulfillment and some meaning in my own personal life. And it's not like it's the only thing, but it's definitely very helpful because, like I say, liberty is something that, at the very core, whether you're religious or atheist or whatever you are, I think every human being recognizes and realizes, and it's instinctive right down to our core, just like in nature, we want to be free. We want to be free. But at the same time, like I've said before, with that freedom definitely comes personal responsibility. And if we can hold those two things up as high ideals, the sky truly is the limit. And, it's not like in Canada, with America to our south, right? It's not like we don't understand freedom or liberty or have never heard anything about it, right? We've been inundated, unfortunately, in Canada with decades and decades of American culture, right? Those great movies and television shows and lots of other arts and entertainment that we've been very privy to. And, think about it. We all sit there. If you're watching Braveheart, I've watched it a few times. I've never heard anyone sitting there that's saying, "Go Longshanks, baby, you're my guy." No, I don't care. And I've been in the movie theater where there's white people, black people, brown people, all different people, yellow people, whatever kind of people, man, woman. And no, when he's saying, "Would you trade this day for all?" No, it's people that are applauding, supporting, and praising the guy that's standing for liberty. So at the end of the day, like I say, forget about the differences and the fact that, yes, we can be divided along political and ideological lines. But one place that most Canadians or most humans will never be divided is our willingness and our ability to fight for our fundamental freedoms and liberties. And that's something we all have to keep at the core and the most important aspect in what we got to do going forward. Like I say, and if we do that, not only is Enlightenment Era 2.0 a reality, and not only is intellectual evolution going to take place that's going to make the Enlightenment Era look like just a walk in the park, but we'll be on the precipice where we're going to, like I say, there will be people will be talking about these times. You know, not necessarily us as a person. I don't care about my particular fame, but I want people to be able to talk about these times, right? These times that there were good men and women in these countries who said, God damn it, I don't care. Screw the controversy, screw the idiots, screw these people that are trying to silence the presses and vote us and intimidate us and literally trying to take away our fundamental freedoms by acts of legislation and threats of force thereof. We stood in defense and defiance against all of that because liberty meant that much to us. And I hope that we can bring that to fruition so that our future and successive generations will be able to speak about these days for many times going forward and pass that torch of liberty on for many future generations going forward. So thanks to you, Keith, and thanks to you, Mitchell, for joining, and thanks for all you great people that joined the chat. Sorry I didn't get to answer as many questions. I'll do another AMA here in a short time. And Mitchell and Keith, anything that you guys want to talk about, feel free to reach out to me for any particular topic or subject matter, because I'm always willing to help and support anyone who is out there advocating for rights, freedoms, and liberties on the individual level.
All right. Keep doing what you're doing.
All right, guys. Did you guys want to say anything at the end here to say anything, tie anything up, or you're good? Good?
Yeah, I would just like to say it's not a, you know, when you said it's about the movement and not the fame, or not about being popular, I agree. You know, it's about freedom, not fame. You know what, if, you know, 20 years from now and, you know, somehow we have a bunch of libertarians, you know, it has to, I mean, we can't decentralize everything from government. So, you know, even if we, you know, I'm going back to the kind of the political aspect is, you know, maybe next election we have 4 or 5 PPC people and some Libertarian Party people in the House of Commons. At least they can hold those authoritarian people in check. If we hold the balance of power, then these Bill C-10 and all this authoritarian control will not happen. We're not going to have a majority government with our ideas because people are apparently afraid of freedom. But if we can just hold the balance of power, so these laws don't pass and people can have more freedom, I think that's what's important. You know, that's the realistic goal. And it would be nice to have, you know, 10 libertarians in parliament, and that holds the balance of power. And these god-awful C-10 bills and everything that controls people doesn't get passed for Canadians. This isn't about my personal goal. This is about for every Canadian. We need to be free. We have to have freedom and fairness and personal responsibility, and we're not going to get it with the way things are going with the current government.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to that I actually think it is possible that libertarians could form a government, and the message for me, and again, it can't be about a leader, it can't be about any one person. What it is, you know, you get that control in order to distribute the control and dismantle the bureaucracy, and I actually think that will resonate with a lot more people. Obviously, it's not going to happen overnight, but I don't know. There's just a groundswell of things happening, and like you said, a lot of people are afraid of libertarians, but if we can combat that fear and just help people understand sort of the innate freedom that we all have and that we want and that we crave, and once you sort of reject this marketing manipulation that's been happening by the other parties, it just feels good. So
I agree. Well said, man. I agree, because that's the thing. At the end of the day, it's really about liberty, and we got to advance it. And most people will definitely want that if they don't want it for someone else, they at least want it for themselves and those they care about. And at the end of the day, even if you're doing it for selfish reasons, it matters not to me, as long as you support freedom and liberty. It's all good in my books. But anyways, like I say, thanks you folks for joining me. Thanks for everyone in the chat. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.